Chapter 427. The needle spun happily between the four areas. Li Shui, who was watching from the side, was full of anticipation. It would be great if we had the same luck as last time. I'll be satisfied as long as I get a C-grade ticket, Bai Xiaowen whispered as he stared at the roulette. In the previous lottery, Bai Xiaowen had won 10% of the special reward area. Then, he had won a ticket and upgraded the reward to a B-grade ticket. This kind of good luck was very difficult to replicate. Gradually, the needle slowed down. It passed by the 40% psionic points reward area, the 30% spirit realm ticket area, and the 20% psionic equipment reward area. The needle slowed down and slowly passed by the 10% area. Then, it moved forward at the speed of a snail. Bai Xiaowen wished he could blow on the needle to make it move faster, because the needle had already circled around and landed in the psionic points reward area. This was the most worthless reward for Bai Xiaowen. The C-grade bronze roulette and the 40% white area, the psionic points reward area, would reward 2,000 to 3,000 psionic points. For an awaken with C-grade fame, this psionic point reward could only be regarded as a consolation prize. Fortunately, although the needle moved slowly, it did not stop. It passed by the white area and entered the ticket reward area. It's about time to stop. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi both stared at the roulette. However, the needle, which was moving at the speed of a turtle, took an unexpectedly long time. Finally, it passed by the ticket area and stopped at the boundary between the ticket area and the equipment reward area. Bai Xiaowen almost vomited blood. He had encountered this situation before. In the end, it would be counted as the latter area, which was the equipment reward, not the ticket reward. Sure enough, the spirit realm's rules prompted him. You have received an equipment reward in the roulette lottery. Based on the level of the roulette you summoned, bronze, your equipment reward is custom-made elite-grade equipment, blue. Custom-made equipment cannot be traded. It can only be worn, disassembled, or used as auxiliary combustion items during equipment strengthening. Please specify a position for the equipment. Bai Xiaowen heaved a sigh of relief. Custom blue equipment is better than random blue equipment. You can choose to customize a part of your body that is not as good. If the quality of the custom-made equipment is good, you can change it. Bai Xiaowen glanced at the equipment on his body. He was now fully equipped with gold-grade equipment, and the other two accessories were even more powerful. The Black Soul Stone and the Blood Essence Stone were basically graduation equipment for awakened ones. Looking at it, there was only a blue ring, finger, a blue wrist guard, wrist, and a blue belt, waist, that could possibly be strengthened. Li Shi suggested, there's no need to consider the ring. You have a spare gold ring. As for the bracers, the 10% increase in range damage is also very good for you. Only the belt can be changed. Bai Xiaowen's rhinoceros strength belt increased his strength by 2 points. He had obtained it when he was adventuring in the treasure space of the Broken Spine Mountain. He nodded and chose the custom-made waist equipment among the options given by the Spirit Realm's rules. Notification from the Spiritual Realm's Lost Frowny Face. Please choose one of the following 3 options as an attribute or skill attached to the equipment. A. Strength plus 3. B. Movement speed plus 5%, evasion rate plus 5%. C. Stamina recovery speed plus 10%. Bai Xiaowen shook his head slightly, feeling a little disappointed. There were no exciting choices among the 3 enhancement options. However, considering that it was a custom-made blue equipment, it was reasonable. First of all, Bai Xiaowen excluded option B. Compared to defensive evasion, Bai Xiaowen preferred to attack. For a long-range shooter/spellcaster with a summoned creature as protection, evasion rate was negligible, and movement speed was not that important. As for close-range combat using the ancient martial arts of the Grassland sect, it did require movement speed. However, Bai Xiaowen's Gold Shoes plus 4 enhancement effect, Sprint, could increase movement speed by 30% for 5 seconds. It was more than enough. In comparison, the permanent 5% movement speed was a little useless. The last attribute, Stamina Recovery Speed, was relatively rare. However, Bai Xiaowen thought about it carefully and eliminated it. Although using the ancient martial arts of the Grassland sect consumed stamina, Bai Xiaowen did not engage in close-range combat many times. In addition, if he needed to recover stamina, Bai Xiaowen still had the food that he had exchanged in the Cane dimension, ale. The effect of recovering stamina was more immediate. In the end, Bai Xiaowen still chose the option of strength +3. In a situation where there were not enough good skills to choose from, the benefits of enhancing the 4 attributes were real. After Bai Xiaowen made his choice, there was a flash of light, and the psionic particles condensed. A blue card was formed and then flipped over. You have received custom-made equipment, Wild Bear's Strength Belt. There was no need to look at the detailed description of the equipment. It only added 3 points to strength. This time, Bai Xiaowen had high hopes for the C-grade bronze will lottery draw. The results were not satisfactory, but a slight improvement was better than no improvement, right? Bai Xiaowen could only comfort himself like this and drink the bitter wine alone. It's okay, Xiaowen. There's no need to be so dejected. Let's do as you said. We're not lucky this time. We're saving our luck for the next God lottery draw. Li Shi comforted Bai Xiaowen. Let's go and pay a New Year's visit to Mom and Dad. Bai Xiaowen was not too depressed. He immediately went with Li Shi to Li Beihai's home. As the guild leader of a guild, Li Beihai was very busy during the New Year. There was an endless stream of awakened super gods who came to pay their New Year's greetings. Finally, it was lunchtime and he finally had some free time. Xiao Bai, you're here? Sit. When Li Beihai saw Bai Xiaowen, a smile appeared on his bearded face. I was just about to call the two of you. Guild leader, are you looking for me? Bai Xiaowen asked. Well, you can say that. Li Beihai chuckled and kept them in suspense. It's a good thing. Take a guess. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes slightly and then opened them. Previously, I asked the guild leader to purchase a batch of equipment enhancement cards through the guild's channels. Is there any progress on this matter? Li Beihai laughed and sat on the chair. The wooden chair creaked in protest. Xiao Bai, your brain works fast, but you didn't guess correctly this time. As for the equipment enhancement cards, I'm collecting them. However, you know that these things are very rare and they're very valuable. Most people won't sell them if they don't lack psionic points, so there's no rush. Then what's the good thing that Dad mentioned? Li Shi acted cute. Dad, don't keep me in suspense. Li Beihai chuckled and took out a slightly tattered piece of sheepskin and placed it on the table. Bai Xiaowen glanced at it and said in surprise, a ticket to the spiritual realm? There are actually 2 prefixes. Is this a B-class ticket? Li Shi asked, Dad, how did you get this ticket? It's a B-class ticket. Li Beihai waved his hand and said, when I was purchasing the equipment enhancement cards, I accidentally heard from a seller that he had a ticket to sell. I thought about buying it and giving it to you as a New Year's gift. However, don't be too happy. Although this ticket is B-class, the prefixes drawn from it shouldn't be anything special. Otherwise, the seller wouldn't be in a hurry to sell it. Bai Xiaowen looked at it carefully. Opportunistic Challenge's treasure map teleports the user to the spiritual realm and disappears after use. Remaining usage period, 6 days, 18 hours, 44 minutes, 52 seconds. Bai Xiaowen looked at the description of the ticket carefully and saw a detailed explanation of the 2 prefixes. Opportunistic, after you enter the spiritual realm, the difficulty of the main mission will be reduced by 50% and the rewards will remain unchanged. Challenge, after you enter the spiritual realm, an additional elite challenge mission will be generated. Bai Xiaowen already knew about the B-class ticket prefixes. The last time he used the roulette and drew a special reward ticket, it was a B-class ticket. He could draw 2 prefixes from the 6 prefixes. These prefixes each had different functions. Some strengthen the user's identity and status, some reduced the difficulty of the main mission or even directly ignored the main mission, and some extended the duration of the main mission, which was the duration of stay in the spiritual realm. In comparison, Bai Xiaowen's favorite was the durability prefix that extended the duration, followed by the freedom prefix that ignored the requirements of the main mission. The treasure map of the spiritual realm ticket randomly drew prefixes of opportunistic and challenging. Obviously, it wasn't very useful. No wonder the seller was in a hurry to sell it. In terms of function, this ticket was not much better than the D-class ticket, standard entry into the user's identity, because the opportunistic and challenging prefixes conflicted with each other. Think about it, the hunters who could complete the elite challenge mission were all powerful people. Obviously, they didn't care much about the opportunistic prefixes that reduced the difficulty of the main mission. And the hunters with average strength who needed to reduce the difficulty of the main mission to increase the success rate would find it difficult to complete the elite challenge mission. Taken together, the value of this B-class ticket was about the same as the C-class ticket, single prefix. But anyway, a ticket was a ticket. Even if it was an E-class ticket, there was a chance to explore the spiritual realm for 10 days. It must be very precious. Bai Xiaowen said, "President, should I buy this ticket with psionic points or merit points?" Li Beihai waved his hand. "No need. It's a New Year's gift. It's equivalent to the elders giving you juniors, New Year's money." "Yes, that's it." Bai Xiaowen sweated. "In order to avoid gossip, I'd better, Xiao Bai, don't be so hesitant. Be a man." Li Beihai patted Bai Xiaowen's shoulder heavily. Half of Bai Xiaowen's body went numb. "I always distinguish between public and private matters. If it's something from the guild, I'll definitely deduct your merit points or barter for it. But I bought it with my psionic points. Who can say no?" Bai Xiaowen could only nod in agreement. He had no choice but to say it. Li Beihai's big hand was comparable to a bear's paw and had black hair on it. It really didn't feel good. According to Bai Xiaowen's estimation, President Taishan's strength was probably comparable to a senior leader's strength. Seeing Bai Xiaowen nod, Li Beihai was quite happy. He waved his hand and said, "Well, you guys have dinner here, and then prepare well. There are still less than 7 days left on this ticket. Try to prepare well before leaving." Bai Xiaowen thought for a moment and said, "President, I received a warning item in the school's activity." As he spoke, Bai Xiaowen took out the warning stone. It was a pair of stones that were stuck together. Bai Xiaowen separated them and handed one to Li Beihai. "It's very simple to use this warning item. As long as one stone is broken, the other stone will be broken even if it's across the spirit realm. When we're exploring the spirit realm, you should be more at ease if you take one of the stones." Li Beihai understood. "In other words, as long as the stone on my side is fine, it means that you'll be fine in the spirit realm." "Good, this item is not bad." He was quite emotional. Last time, when the two of them didn't return from the Cane realm, he was worried sick. Although Li Beihai knew that Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi both had returning items, who knew what would happen in the spirit realm? Take Xiao Zhixiong for example. He clearly had returning and teleporting items, but he still died at the hands of Bai Xiaowen. With this warning stone, although it wouldn't be of much help, at least when he saw the stone, Li Beihai would be at ease. Bai Xiaowen immediately said, "Actually, if something happens on Earth and we need to rush back, President, you can take the initiative to crush the stone. We can give up the main mission and return directly." Li Beihai laughed heartily. "Hey, what can happen here? You can explore the spirit realm at ease. Don't worry about home." In his words, Li Beihai had already treated Bai Xiaowen as a member of the family. Of course, Bai Xiaowen could hear this and felt a warm feeling in his heart. Originally, Bai Xiaowen wanted to give the warning stone to his sister, Xiao Jun, but Xiao Jun was not an awakened yet. It was inconvenient for her to carry a psionic item. It was better to give it to Li Beihai, who was also an awakened. In any case, Bai Xiaowen would explain to Xiao Jun about the warning stone. The effect of this item in Li Beihai's hands was the same. It would make the family feel at ease. Next, Bai Xiaowen entered Li Beihai's study and began to collect some targeted information. "Xiaowen, which plane world do you think this ticket will match us to?" Li Shi asked. Bai Xiaowen was holding a book of Western fantasy legends and reading. He was multitasking and answered Li Shui, "I can't tell the type of world just from the words treasure map. However, this treasure map is made of sheepskin, so it's basically a Western legend. I think we will enter the hometown of Alicia, Cazares, and Magic, the mother plane of the treasure space of the Dead Soul Lake." "Why? Is it because of the clay tablet with the prophecy?" Li Shui had a good memory and quickly recalled. Chapter 428. According to Bai Xiaowen's understanding, this kind of special psionic item should actually function as a locator. Bai Xiaowen's psionic items that could function as locators were not only limited to the clay tablet of prophecy, but also the shadow maze key, the eye of Amitabha, and so on. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen was very confident that he would enter the mother plane of the treasure space in the Dead Soul Lake this time. When looking up the information, Bai Xiaowen also chose to focus on the keywords, such as Naga, Lobster, Amitabha, and so on, to gain a deeper understanding. Matching the plane world. Matching successful. Character data has been scanned. Queuing, please wait a moment, entering the plane world, drifting portraits, dim light, suffocating invitation letter, creatures who seek the mysteries, attend the legendary banquet together. The round table turns, the earth trembles, fear, cowardice, suspicion, revenge. Who can find the fragments of the key of truth through lies? Those who stare into the abyss. Have you ever felt, the will of the abyss lives in your heart, just like the prelude to entering the Cane Plane world last time? After the scene froze, Bai Xiaowen and Li Shui did not immediately enter. Instead, they paused in the void. The spirit realm's rules prompted, due to the special nature of the ticket you used, you have received the following rewards. Reward 1, speculation, omitted. Reward 2, challenge, omitted. Generating elite challenge mission, generated. Elite side mission, the secret of the voodoo sect, activated. Mission objective, find the voodoo sect's hidden lair in Hodge Town and destroy it. Mission difficulty, mission reward, unknown. Mission time limit, 72 hours. Due to the permanent establishment of the team, Li Shui also received this mission prompt. Accept it. It's a side mission anyway. If it's not suitable for you, it won't matter if you give up, Bai Xiaowen said and chose to accept the mission. After Bai Xiaowen accepted the mission, the spirit realm's rules continued to prompt, you will explore the Black Tide Plane as a free person. Please confirm your name. Bai Xiaowen still used the name Dior S. Kale Bloom. Then, under the guidance of the spirit realm's rules, Li Shui once again cut in as Bai Xiaowen's sister. Her name was still Charlotte Kale Bloom. After they were done, the void in front of Bai Xiaowen and Li Shui dissipated, and they appeared in an ordinary wooden house. The memories related to the Friedman siblings were transmitted into their minds. The two of them were already experienced, so they closed their eyes and carefully digested the memories of this identity. Bai Xiaowen opened his eyes first. There's nothing special about the identity of this pair of brother and sister who cut in. I'll go through the background of this plane first. You can continue to fill in the blanks. This world is called the Black Tide Realm. Our birthplace is a coastal territory called Hodge Town. This pair of siblings are orphans. They work in a bread mill in Hodge Town to make a living. Li Shui nodded and said, there's one more thing in the memories I received, and that is, there has been a series of disappearances in Hodge Town recently. The sheriff, An, has put up a bounty. Anyone who provides clues will be rewarded with 10 gold coins. Bai Xiaowen also digested such a thing in the memories he digested. He nodded and said, I think the disappearances are very likely related to the target of the Elite Challenge mission we received, the Voodoo Sect. From the name alone, the Voodoo Sect is not a good organization. Li Shui agreed. The two of them verified each other's memories again. Not long after, the Spirit Realm's rules prompted again, main mission, the Truth in the Fog, initiated. Mission objective, assist the Sheriff of Hodge Town in solving the disappearances. Mission duration, 10 days. Mission difficulty, mission reward, unknown. The two of them quickly looked at each other. When I was sorting out the memory fragments, there's one thing I didn't mention. Sheriff Ahan lives in the same neighborhood as us, so he has some impression of us, Bai Xiaowen said slowly. For the main mission, Sheriff Ahan should be a key figure. In this way, the difficulty of finding Ahan and winning his trust will be reduced a lot. This should be a reflection of the ticket rewards speculation. It reduces the difficulty of the main mission, but it doesn't affect the reward. Li Shi curled his lips and said, "That's all?" The speculation prefix is really not useful. I think the sheriff's impression is not as exaggerated as reducing the difficulty of the main mission by 50%. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, "No, the spirit realm's rules shouldn't lie. If it says 50%, it means 50%. I think Ahan should not be a simple character." "Then should we go and find this key sheriff now?" Li Shi asked. "I personally prefer not to go for the time being," Bai Xiaowen said after thinking for a while. "We don't have any clues now. If we go rashly, we won't be of any help other than consuming Ahan's favorability. If we disturb a troubled sheriff for no reason, I'm afraid it will be counterproductive." After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said, "Also, Ahan's position in the town should be relatively important. His every move may be watched by someone with ulterior motives. We are still in the dark, so we can secretly investigate. Once we come into contact with Ahan, we will inevitably move from the dark to the light and fall into the eyes of someone with ulterior motives." Li Shi nodded in conviction. The two of them discussed for a while and decided to investigate in secret first. When they pushed the door open, under the guidance of the spirit realm's rules, the two of them each spent 100 psionic points to convert their language into ancient Latin. Although Bai Xiaowen could speak ancient Latin, he was not proficient in it, and his accent was a bit awkward. Therefore, the 100 psionic points could not be saved. When they opened the wooden door, a slightly fishy sea breeze blew in their faces. The sky was clear, and the sea was blue. Looking east along the town's road, Bai Xiaowen could even see the scene of the sky and the water merging into one. Breathing in the sea breeze made him feel relaxed and happy. Bai Xiaowen first went to the sheriff's mansion and saw the bounty poster in front of the door. On the bounty poster, it was not only written that the reward for providing clues was 10 gold coins, but there was also a list of missing people and a portrait. The portrait was quite detailed and meticulously drawn. It was much more reliable than the wanted posters in the Huaxia period dramas that Bai Xiaowen had seen. So many people have gone missing? Bai Xiaowen's heart skipped a beat. The list of missing people posted by Sheriff Ahan already had as many as 13 people. Are there a lot of missing people? Li Shi, who had taken many lives under his hands, wondered why Bai Xiaowen was so surprised. Bai Xiaowen thought for a moment and said, "There are 13 people who have gone missing, so the real number is probably much higher. In a town, the people who are most likely to go missing are homeless, beggars, and other people who have no one to rely on. But look at the 13 people posted on the poster. Almost all of them have complete families, and it was their families who came to report the case. In other words, many homeless people in Hodge Town have gone missing. No one has caught the culprit, so he started to target the residents who have complete families." Li Shi nodded. "That's right. It's easy to understand. If I were the culprit, I would definitely start with the homeless people." Speaking of this, Li Shi's expression suddenly changed. "Then, you say, our identities, aren't we just people who have no one to rely on? Why weren't we attacked? We're two orphans, homeless and unemployed. Even if we disappeared from the world, no one would blame us." Bai Xiaowen said, "No, after all, we live on the same street as the sheriff. The bread factory we work in is also on the same street. Our lives are monotonous. It's reasonable that the culprit didn't do anything to us." "And you missed one point," Bai Xiaowen added. "Since there have been 13 disappearances in a row, it means that the culprit can no longer be caught. He has to continue his operation at the risk of alerting the sheriff. So, the possibility of us being attacked will increase. Well, the rules of the spiritual realm will not give us a task that we cannot complete. So as time goes by, the actions of the mastermind behind the scenes will get bigger and bigger, and eventually reach out to us. Li Shui thought hard. Should we take the initiative to attack? For example, go to a deserted area at night and create a chance for the culprit? Bai Xiaowen smiled. That makes sense. Waiting passively is a waste of time. Your idea will undoubtedly increase the chances of the culprit coming to us. However, I have a better idea. Follow me. It was still daytime, so the mastermind's attack wouldn't be so open and aboveboard. Bai Xiaowen brought Li Shui and walked in Hodge Town. He was not walking aimlessly. Instead, he was investigating the last place where the missing people were seen. Hodge Town was a big town. The roads were crisscrossed and complicated. However, Bai Xiaowen's super brain had already formed a 2D road map. The last place where the 13 missing people were seen was fixed in his mind. Then, he outlined the possible routes. Finally, Bai Xiaowen brought Li Shui to the south of Hodge Town. They stopped near a shabby street in the business district. It was an exaggeration to say that this was a business district. The business district here was very different from the bustling and orderly business districts in the cities on Earth. There were only a few small shops with wooden signs. The doors were old and shabby, and there was not even a decent drain. The road was muddy and emitted a stench. It stinks. Li Shui fanned his nose. Only smelly drains can hide rats. Bai Xiaowen smiled and led Li Shui into the first shop on the street. The shop was called Akaya's Cauldron. The shop owner's name was Akaya, just like the name of the shop. This shop sold alchemy potions. On the shelves were health recovery potion, bull strength potion, mongoose potion, and other combat potions. There was nothing special about their attributes. They were not even as good as the potions made by ordinary pharmacists on Earth. They could not even be compared to Bai Xiaowen's craftsmanship. In fact, alchemy in the spiritual realm was very similar to the pharmaceutical industry on Earth. The pharmaceutical industry on Earth was born out of the alchemy industry in the spiritual realm. Moreover, the pharmacists on Earth had relatively accurate pharmaceutical equipment, such as stopwatches, beakers, and alcohol lamps. Therefore, the finished products of their pharmaceutical products were better than those of the low-end alchemists in the spiritual realm. Moreover, the potions on Earth could be bought with Earth currency, while the alchemy items in the spiritual realm could only be bought with spiritual realm currency such as gold and silver. The competition was even lower. However, there were some masters in the alchemy industry in the spiritual realm. Not only could they make potions, but they could also make many special alchemy items. This was something that the pharmacists on Earth could not compare with. They could only learn slowly. Welcome, young people. The shop owner, Akaya, who was sitting behind the counter, raised his eyelids. He accurately identified that the two of them did not have much purchasing power. He quickly lowered his eyelids and said weakly, "My potions here are the best. Tell me what you like. I'm here to inquire about something." Bai Xiaowen expressed his purpose of coming. "Please, I don't do information business." Akaya was a little impatient. He quickly glanced at Bai Xiaowen. Hey, I understand. But no one can't get along with money, right?" Bai Xiaowen's fingers shook, and a few gold coins swayed in his hand. A pleasant sound was heard. Akaya's eyes were a little dazed. He realized that he seemed to have underestimated the young man in front of him. So what if he was young? So what if he was dressed shabbily? First, let me see if your gold coins are real. Akaya was still cautious. These gold coins were the psionic currency that Bai Xiaowen had obtained in the Kane realm. They could be brought out of the spiritual realm and used as currency in specific spiritual realms. Since they were both Western fantasy realms, Bai Xiaowen guessed that the gold coins in the Kane realm should be similar to the gold coins here. Bai Xiaowen first handed over a gold coin. Akaya took the gold coin and looked at it carefully for a while. He frowned and said, "Strange. Why haven't I seen the king's portrait and the words on the back?" "The Gorse Empire." Bai Xiaowen said calmly, "This is an ancient imperial gold coin that I obtained by chance. No matter when it was made, it's still shiny gold, right?" Akaya put the gold coin in his mouth and bit it hard. His eyes quickly curved into two arcs as he smiled. Yes, yes. Generous young man, you can ask questions now. For the sake of the gold, I will tell you everything I know. Chapter 429. Although Hodgetown was called a town, its actual size and population were about the same as a city in the Cane Bit Wall. The only difference was that there were no city walls. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi were orphans and lived on Windmill Street in the North District, where the sheriff was located. However, Akaya's cauldron was located in the South District, so it was normal that they had not seen Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi before. I have some personal property disputes, but for some reason, I can't come forward personally, Bai Xiaowen said. So I want to find some professionals to help me. Professionals? What do you mean? Akaya's expression was a little thought-provoking, but his tone was a little more serious. Bai Xiaowen added, professionals who can solve problems outside of the law. When necessary, they don't mind having a little blood on their hands. Akaya frowned and flicked the Gorse Empire gold coin in his hand. Young sir, for the sake of the gold coin, I can provide you with a clue. However, I have to say in advance that I'm a law-abiding businessman. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. Of course, I'll pretend that I've never been to the shop. Akaya nodded. Okay. Actually, the professionals you're looking for are in Blackwater Alley, which is the left turn at the end of our street. They have a unified organization called the Crows. A decent businessman like me would never want to deal with those maggots. Bai Xiaowen got the information he wanted. He nodded and thanked Akaya, then took out another Gorse Empire gold coin. Second question. Are there any hidden religious places in Hodgetown? Bai Xiaowen asked. Isn't the North District Cathedral a religious place? Akaya frowned. If you're talking about a hidden church, there's a small church in the South District, but not many people go there because there aren't many residents in the South District who have faith. What I want to ask is not the Church of the Lord of Light, Bai Xiaowen said. Then I don't know. Akaya shrugged. It seems that I can't earn the second gold coin, young man. Bai Xiaowen nodded thoughtfully and left Akaya's cauldron. While walking on a remote street, Li Shi asked, about the two questions you just asked, I roughly understand your intention. His second question was about the poison sect, but he didn't get any information about it, so he left it for the time being. The first question should be a clue to the main quest, right? Bai Xiaowen nodded. You suspect that the mastermind is this underground organization called Crow? Li Shi asked. I'm not sure yet, Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. However, for a large number of missing people in the city, the only place we can get clues from is the sheriff or the underground gangs. I don't believe that these underground gangs don't know anything about the disappearance of so many people. The two talked as they walked. Li Shi speculated, I think that the Crow organization is related to the missing people case. Even if they aren't the mastermind, they are at least a peripheral organization that follows the orders of the mastermind to kidnap people. Bai Xiaowen smiled. Don't be in a hurry to kill them. Let's take a look first. They walked to the end of the street and turned left. The two stepped into Blackwater Alley. Hey, where did these two lambs come from? A brawny man with a knife scar on his arm stopped the two of them. After looking at them carefully, he said in a mocking tone, this is not a place for obedient children. Li Shi glanced at Bai Xiaowen. After seeing Bai Xiaowen nod slightly, he immediately stepped forward and reached out to grab the scar-faced brawny man's arm. He pulled hard and bent his knee. With a muffled sound, the brawny man's eyes almost popped out. His body quickly bent like a big shrimp. Li Shi followed up with a kick to the back of the brawny man's leg. The brawny man knelt heavily on the ground. Before the scar-faced man could curse, he felt a chill on his neck. A noble's sword was placed across his neck. Who are you people? If you dare to kill me, don't even think about living in Hodgetown anymore. We, the Crows, will never let any of our enemies go. The scarred man gasped in pain, if you dare to kill me, don't even think about living in Hodgetown anymore. Bai Xiaowen said indifferently, "You're just maggots in the latrine. Do you think you're so great? Listen, we were commissioned by the sheriff, Mr. Ahan, to investigate the missing people case in Hodge Town. The Crow organization is our main suspect. If you don't want to die, lead the way to your boss." The scar-faced man was shocked and angry. "Ahan? That damned sheriff was here a long time ago." Boss Benny also explained very clearly that the missing people case had nothing to do with us. "Cut the crap." Li Shi exerted a little force on his sword. Instantly, drops of blood seeped out. The scar-faced man could only raise his hands. Okay, don't be like this. I'm willing to take you to Boss Benny. Can you move your sword away first?" Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi exchanged a look. Li Shi withdrew his sword. The scar-faced man walked in front timidly to lead the way. The other two followed closely behind. Walking in the black water alley, the two met a few members of the Crow organization. Bai Xiaowen used his insight to scan a few of them. He found that their strength was about the same as the scar-faced man. They were all normal members, around level 5 or 6. There was not even a single elite member. Bai Xiaowen estimated the strength of the Crow organization and came to the conclusion that he and Li Shi could do whatever they wanted in the black water alley. In fact, Bai Xiaowen was quite confident that the Crow organization was not involved in the missing people case. Otherwise, he would not have told them his purpose in coming here. From Sheriff Ahan's point of view, he must have gone to all the gangs in the city to investigate the missing people case. However, the final result was that he did not find anything. That was why he issued the bounty. The scar-faced man also said that Sheriff Ahan had been here before and communicated with the boss of the Crow organization, Benny. Under the premise of knowing this, Bai Xiaowen still wanted to break into the Crow organization's headquarters. In fact, he wanted to beat this underground organization into submission and take it for his own use. Otherwise, as an awakened who cut in, how could he investigate without knowing anything? In the depths of the black water alley, in an underground casino, Bai Xiaowen met the boss of the Crow organization, Benny. Benny was a tall and thin man. His eyes were sinister and his cheeks were thin. Hidden under a black cloak, he reminded people of a vulture that was searching for food. Bai Xiaowen immediately used his insight. The notification showed that 25 psionic points had been deducted. Benny, Elite Level 8, Race, Humanoid/Human, Profession, Night Bandit, Attributes, Strength 35, Agility 49, Constitution 32, Spirit 20, Skill 1, Protection of the Night, activates the concealment skill, making it difficult for the enemy to discover. Passive effect, Concealment Priority at Night +1, Skill 2, Combo, successfully hitting the enemy multiple times in a row will cause additional physical damage. The more combo, the higher the additional damage. Skill 3, Overwhelming the enemy with a show of strength. The first attack without being discovered by the enemy will cause the enemy to be temporarily paralyzed. Skill 4, Bandit Leader, Passive, health points increased by 150 points. After seeing the shared information, Li Shi whispered in the team channel, it's actually level 8. With Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi's level 5 awakened, it was a bit surprising that a level 8 character would appear among the matched Spirit World characters. According to the usual rules, the level of the matched Spirit World characters would be 1 or 2 levels higher than the awakened. However, there were also exceptions. That was, if the Spirit World characters were matched to a specific Spirit World plane with positioning items, there might be an abnormal phenomenon, such as being 3 levels higher or lower than the awakened. Of course, the rules of the Spirit World would also make a corresponding balance. Where was the balance point? It was in the entry point of the awakened. For example, the Aaron plane where Bai Xiaowen carried out the profession change test was a plane with a very high level. At that time, Bai Xiaowen had not completed his profession change. Therefore, the rules of the Spirit World set Bai Xiaowen's entry point at the north, which was sparsely populated and desolate. The Spirit World characters Bai Xiaowen needed to deal with were only level 3 and below. Of course, he courted death and attracted the level 7 leader Gloria, so he was not treated well by the rules of the spirit world. The level 8 elite in front of him was Benny, the leader of the Crow organization. His strength was about equivalent to a level 5 or 6 leader. He was at a disadvantage in terms of priority and skills. However, because he had crossed the threshold of level 7, all his attributes were relatively high, and he also had an additional 150 health points. However, this did not pose a threat to Bai Xiaowen. After listening to the grievance of the scarred man, Benny nodded slightly and looked at Bai Xiaowen with his gloomy eyes. "Were you really sent by the sheriff?" "I don't believe it." Bai Xiaowen said calmly, "It doesn't matter whether it's true or not. The point is, do you want to die or live?" Bai Xiaowen's direct threat angered a few of the elite members of the Crow organization. "Arrogant little brat, go back and drink your milk." A bald, brawny man pounced over, his fists wearing black iron gloves. He looked fierce as he attacked Bai Xiaowen. Li Shi pulled out both of his swords and crossed them. He blocked the punch first, then quickly slashed back. With 3 slashes, he activated his combo slash. 3 slashes accurately hit the bald man's throat. Blood spurted out. The bald man covered his throat in windpipe in disbelief. He made gurgling sounds as his body slowly fell to the ground. Finally, he died on the spot. This bald man was a strength-type intermediate elite. However, Li Shi's current strength was as high as 27 points. It was more than enough for him to block his attack without losing his balance. After Li Shi blocked the opponent's attack, the explosive speed of his counterattack was something that the bald man could not compare to. 3 slashes, one of them triggered a critical hit and killed him on the spot. Seeing the bald man fall to the ground dead, the other members of the Crow organization were even more shocked and angry. However, there was an obvious hint of fear in their eyes. Benny's eyes were cold. Under the black cloak, his hands quietly reached for his dagger. Suddenly, Bai Xiaowen coughed. A white light flashed, and the fat guy who had fused with the voodoo poison appeared in front of him. Beside him were 4 skeleton sword and shield wielders. Fatty's ferocious face made many people tremble in fear. Someone exclaimed, "This is the poison sect." Benny glared at that person sternly. Immediately, that person fell silent. Bai Xiaowen understood. He narrowed his eyes and said, "It seems that you are not willing to cooperate." Swoosh! Fatty reached out and hooked the iron chain. It tightly wrapped around the person who had just spoken and dragged him over. If it was an ordinary person, they might not be able to find the person who had exclaimed among so many members of the Crow organization. However, Bai Xiaowen's observation and memory were extremely powerful. He immediately found the person's position and ordered Fatty to attack through telepathy. Bai Xiaowen's nonchalant behavior angered Benny even more. He roared, "All of you, attack!" However, when all the members of the Crow organization were about to attack Bai Xiaowen with their swords, an awe-inspiring pressure spread out from Bai Xiaowen. Except for a few elite members, most of the members of the Crow organization were stunned and fell to the ground. The elites of the Crow organization who were still standing, as well as Benny, fell into a state of fear, although they were not stunned. Bai Xiaowen grabbed the collar of the unlucky guy who had been hooked by Fatty. "Hey, now you answer the question." After the person was awakened, he had a frightened look on his face. I don't know anything." "Tell me about the poison sect you just mentioned," Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. "What do you think the servant of mine has to do with the poison sect, Don't play dumb with me anymore, or I'll kill you." With a long face, the man said, "Boss Benny once told me that the poison sect has a kind of giant corpse that has been modified. Its fighting prowess is very strong, and it can fight against 10 people at the same time. This monster is very similar to it. That's why He regretted his words. When Bai Xiaowen was interrogating the unlucky guy, Benny and his subordinates finally woke up from their state of fear and stun. Looking at the mysterious Bai Xiaowen, these people couldn't help but feel fear in their hearts. However, they didn't dare to go forward. Bai Xiaowen asked a few more questions. After confirming that the unlucky guy didn't have any valuable information, He threw him aside and patted the non-existent dust off his hands. It seems that Mr. Benny already knows the difference between you and me. You also know that I can end your life at any time. Benny's face changed several times, and he finally said bitterly, yes. I'm glad we've reached a consensus. Now, I'll state my conditions, Bai Xiaowen said. If you cooperate, you can live and even get a considerable amount of money. If you don't cooperate, you should know the consequences. What do you want, sir? We'll do our best. Chapter 430. It was true that the one with the bigger fist was the boss. Benny called for 2 men to carry away the body of the bald man who had not given his name up until his death. They wiped the blood off the ground. He, on the other hand, respectfully invited Bai Xiaowen to the backyard of the casino and personally served them. How much do you know about the poison sect? Bai Xiaowen looked at the leader of the underground organization and asked. Benny thought for a moment and said cautiously, all I know are rumors. There's a secret base of the poison sect in the southern district of Hodge Town. However, not many people know where it is. The poison sect has nothing to do with you? Bai Xiaowen sneered. If it's just a rumor, how can an ordinary subordinate of yours know about the poison sect's modified giant corpse? Benny showed a terrified expression. It's just something he heard. It doesn't count. Bai Xiaowen was very observant. He could tell that Benny was lying. The terrified expression on his face was a little fake. Mr. Benny, I'm sorry, but I gave you a chance. Bai Xiaowen suddenly stood up and raised his hand. A group of summoned creatures appeared. The skeleton warrior swung its greatsword and used whirlwind slash. Its strength was slightly lower than Benny's, so the knockback effect of the skill didn't take effect. However, it successfully knocked Benny into an unbalanced state. The Wolf King Wrathclaw directly used Howl. The attack power and attack speed of all the summoned creatures increased by 20%. Taking advantage of Benny's unbalanced state, the Wrathclaw pounced and pressed Benny down. It used its ultimate skill and clawed 5 times in a row. Blood splattered everywhere. Li Shi had already received Bai Xiaowen's team password. He activated Fiendish Dance and rushed forward. The first thing he did was to use Blood Drain. He absorbed an extra 10 points of strength from Benny and used it on himself. He instantly entered a super powerful state and stabbed out fiercely with his sword. The fear in Benny's eyes instantly magnified. Looking at Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi's youthful appearance, Benny still had a trace of contempt in his heart. He felt that with his Jianghu experience, it would be easy to get rid of these 2 young people. If it wasn't for the fact that the blood of the bald man's subordinates hadn't dried yet, Benny wouldn't even be able to pretend to be respectful on the surface. However, when Bai Xiaowen launched his surprise attack and the sharp blade touched his body, Benny realized that he had made a grave mistake. The young man and woman in front of him were extremely domineering. They killed without batting an eyelid. Even a leader like him was no exception. If you kill me, you won't know anything about the poison sect. Under the pressure of the Wrathclaw's giant claw, Benny quickly begged for mercy. Let me go, I'm willing to listen to your orders. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. It's too late. Bai Xiaowen had ordered the Wrathclaw to use 2 big moves with long cooldowns. He had also ordered Li Shi to go all out. Of course, he wanted to kill this elite leader as soon as possible. Hearing the noise, a group of Crow members in the front yard rushed over. When they saw this scene, they were all stunned. Bai Xiaowen's eyes swept over them. These people actually took a step back in unison. No one cared whether Benny lived or died. Benny was dead. Although he was a level 8 elite with an additional 150 HP and a total of 470 HP, he still couldn't survive Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi's all-out attacks. After the Wrathclaw's big move ended, Benny's HP had dropped to less than 1/3. Benny called for his subordinates, but no one was willing to step forward. Under the combined attacks of the summoned creatures and Li Shi, Benny's remaining HP quickly dropped to 0. He turned into a corpse and fell to the ground. A large silver treasure chest condensed. The people in the spiritual realm couldn't see the treasure chest. They could only see Bai Xiaowen reaching out and putting the treasure chest into the storage space. I've said it before. If you're willing to cooperate, not only will you live, but you'll also get a considerable amount of wealth. If you don't cooperate, you'll die. Bai Xiaowen repeated what he had said before. However, this time, the target of his killing was the boss of the Crow organization, Benny. The degree of shock to the hearts of the people was naturally much higher than when he had killed the bald man. Benny's subordinates, the members of Crow, were stunned for a moment. They didn't know what to say. Their boss had died right under their noses. What should they, the small fries, do? Revenge? No way. Bai Xiaowen's Haoshiku Haki, deterrence skill, had already stunned everyone. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and pointed at 3 people. They were the 3 elite cadres of Crow. You, and you. Which one of you wants to take over Benny's position? The 3 elite cadres showed desire in their eyes, but there was also a trace of hesitation. After all, Boss Benny's body was still in front of them. It could be regarded as an example. It was good to be in the position now, but if they didn't serve the master in front of them well, the next one to be killed would be them. Bai Xiaowen saw the doubts of the 3 people, but he didn't say anything. At this time, an ordinary member of Crow suddenly rushed out of the crowd and knelt in front of Bai Xiaowen. Your Excellency, I, Joshua, am willing to be your loyal servant. This Joshua was the one who called out the 3 words voodoo sect before. He was hooked by the fat guy and then questioned by Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen nodded. Well, since you are willing to obey, then you can replace Benny and lead Crow. But before that, you have to show your loyalty. Joshua raised his head and said without hesitation, Please instruct me, Master. The members of the Crow organization behind him all had looks of disdain on their faces. Wasn't the speed at which he switched sides a little too fast? Especially the 3 elite cadres, their hearts were filled with resentment. Joshua's position in the organization was far lower than the 3 of them. What right did he have to lead Crow? No one noticed that Joshua's movements were a little stiff, and his facial expression was a little mechanical. In fact, Joshua had been hooked by Bai Xiaowen when the fat guy hooked him and Bai Xiaowen questioned him. He was successfully bewitched by Bai Xiaowen. He was actually Bai Xiaowen's servant. Bai Xiaowen used the bewitching curse on Joshua mainly to read his memory. However, Joshua's position in Crow was lower, and the memory reading could only obtain fragments. In the end, Bai Xiaowen didn't obtain any valuable information. He only vaguely knew that Crow was related to the voodoo sect. Bai Xiaowen said to Joshua, Benny made me very unhappy. You are his former subordinate, what do you think should be done? Joshua said with a slightly mechanical voice, Benny dared to offend Master, so he deserved to die. Although he was killed by Master, his corpse should still be whipped to vent Master's anger. After saying that, Joshua took out a dagger and stabbed Benny's corpse twice. Bai Xiaowen nodded with satisfaction and threw out a money bag. Very good, you are my loyal servant. You should be rewarded. The money bag fell to the ground, and golden coins rolled out from it. The crisp sound of the coins hitting the ground made the members of Crow gulp. Take this money bag. From now on, you are the leader of Crow. Chapter 431. Bai Xiaowen had already used insight to see that Jida was a level 7 elite. In the entire Crow organization, he was second only to Benny. But Joshua has already shown his loyalty, Bai Xiaowen said with a hint of interest. I admit that your ability is stronger than Joshua's. However, I still value loyalty more. I believe you understand this. Jida said loudly, Please rest assured, sir. My loyalty is not inferior to Joshua's. In order to prevent Bai Xiaowen from misunderstanding, he asked for Bai Xiaowen's permission before he slowly pulled out the iron axe from his waist and chopped down on Benny's corpse. Benny's corpse was whipped for the second time, and his head rolled away. The other members of the Crow organization saw this bloody scene and were all moved. Most of them tried to suppress their emotions, and only a few of them looked at Jida with disdain. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. Alright, I will temporarily accept your loyalty. You can be the second leader of the Crow organization, and have the same status as Joshua. He raised his hand and asked two people to come over and put Benny's headless corpse and head together. Bai Xiaowen did not have the perverted hobby of whipping corpses. Bai Xiaowen purposely did Joshua's servant poke Benny's corpse to set an example for the other members of the Crow organization, and give them a chance to follow suit. Especially since Joshua's status was not high, if he relied on whipping corpses to climb to the top, how could the other members of the Crow organization be satisfied? Therefore, Jita's performance was within Bai Xiaowen's expectations. The Crow organization's internal cohesion was weak, and the loyalty of the members to the leader was very low. The leader Benny was cold by nature. When he saw his subordinate, the bald man, being killed on the spot, he did not even dare to say a word. This kind of leader was destined to not have any loyal followers. Seeing that Jita's loyalty was recognized by Bai Xiaowen, the other members of the Crow organization were moved. However, Bai Xiaowen had already achieved his goal after obtaining Jita's loyalty. He immediately ordered the others to leave. Jita and Joshua stayed behind to ask about the missing persons case and the poison sect. Perhaps it was due to the presence of a competitor like Joshua, but Jita's attitude towards Bai Xiaowen could only be described as fawning over her. Compared to Benny's previous behavior, there was a clear difference. Is the Crow organization involved in the missing persons case? Do you know anything about it? Bai Xiaowen asked about the main mission. Jita's face was filled with fear as he shook his head. Sir, I can guarantee with my life that the Crow organization has nothing to do with the missing persons case. Although the organization's business was decided by boss Benny. No, that fellow Benny, he did not dare to get involved in such a large case. Although he's not a good person, he's not that bold. Bai Xiaowen could tell from Jita's expression that he was not lying. Then the second question, how much do you know about the poison sect? Bai Xiaowen stared at Jita with shining eyes, not letting go of any of his subtle expressions and reactions. Jita answered honestly, yes, the poison sect does have some cooperation with us. What kind of cooperation? Jita replied, we're collecting some special materials. Sir, you know that many of the poison sect's rituals require some inexplicable mediums, such as the blood of virgins, the eyes of frogs, or the venom glands of cobras. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. Where's the poison sect's base in Hodgetown? Jita shook his head. Since you're working with them, how can you not know where their base is? How dare you lie to me? Bai Xiaowen could tell from Jita's heartbeat, breathing, and subtle expressions that he wasn't lying. However, he still had to put pressure on Jita. Jita hurriedly protested, Sir, I really don't know. Even Benny doesn't know where the poison sect's secret base is. Every time we make a deal, they come to collect the items and give us a new list of materials to collect. Since they're very generous, we're happy to earn some extra money. After all, collecting the materials is just troublesome. It's not that difficult. They came to you. Who was it? You should have followed him, right? Bai Xiaowen asked. Jita replied. It wasn't a human that came. It was a huge stitched corpse monster, similar to the one you summoned. That's why Joshua called out the poison sect's name when he saw your corpse monster for the first time. After a short pause, Jita continued, but he seemed a little guilty. We saw how generous the other party was, so we did follow the corpse monster in an attempt to find its location. However, the brothers we sent out didn't return. The next day, we found their corpses hanging at the entrance of Blackwater Alley. Their bodies were covered in maggots and mold, and their deaths were too horrible to look at. After that, Benny never mentioned anything about stalking me again. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. Jita's words were probably true. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi discussed in the team channel. We came to Blackwater Alley to look for the main mission and solve the missing people case. However, we didn't expect to find a clue about the poison sect, Bai Xiaowen said in the team channel. Li Shi said, Hey, I thought the missing people case had something to do with the poison sect. Do you think it's possible? It's basically impossible, Bai Xiaowen said. According to Jita's description, the poison sect's secret lair in Hodgetown should have a small number of people. There might only be a few elites, 1 or 2 senior leaders, or even 1 or 2 commanders without an army. With such a small number of people, it's impossible for them to plan and carry out a large-scale kidnapping case without being discovered by the public security officers and the Crow organization. Bai Xiaowen deduced the poison sect's personnel by reverse reasoning. If the voodoo cult had a large number of members, they wouldn't have to outsource the troublesome but not difficult tasks such as collecting the eyes of frogs and the venom glands of poisonous snakes. Based on the principle of confidentiality, shouldn't this kind of work be done by their own people, the voodoo cult members? After listening to Bai Xiaowen's explanation, Li Shi quickly agreed. Next, we can focus on the poison sect's side mission, Bai Xiaowen said after thinking for a while. Although the main mission has the highest status, it has a 10-day time limit, and its difficulty rating is only A level. I believe we can complete it in the end. The time limit for the poison sect's elite side mission is only 72 hours. Since we have a clue now, let's do this first. Li Shi said, but the Crow organization doesn't know the location of the poison sect's secret lair. How are we going to find it? Bai Xiaowen smiled and turned to ask Jita, how many days does the poison sect's people contact you? Jita said, I'm not sure about that. It seems to be very irregular. When they're in a hurry, they'll come once every 1 or 2 days. At the end of the list of materials left by the zombie monsters, the wording is very strict, and they'll add some threatening words. Other times, they're more relaxed. They'll come once every 10 days or half a month. When was the last time they came? 3 days ago, Jita answered quickly this time. 2 days ago? 4 days ago. Give me the list of materials left by the zombie monsters from the poison sect every time they come, especially the notes that they send to ask for more. Jita was a little frightened. We don't keep things like lists of materials properly. There may only be a few left, and they're all recent. Okay, give me all the lists you have, Bai Xiaowen said indifferently. He didn't expect an underground organization to have strict rules and regulations and to keep documents properly archived. After a while, Bai Xiaowen held the lists and asked Jita a few questions. Then, he muttered to himself. There are a total of 4 lists here. They're the materials that were purchased 4 times recently, Bai Xiaowen analyzed in the teen channel. According to Jita's recollection, 3 of the lists were from 3, 4, and 6 days ago. They can be seen as next to each other. The notes at the end of the lists are also very impatient, as if they can't wait to pick up the goods on the spot. The earliest one was from half a month ago. So, I infer that the people from the poison sect won't come to pick up the goods in a short period of time. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said, it's a pity. I was thinking that if the people from the poison sect came in the next 2 days, we could follow the zombie monsters and follow the clues. Bai Xiaowen's analysis was clear and logical, but Li Shi was confused. How do you know that the people from the poison sect won't come in a short period of time? From the irregular pickup dates, we can infer that these materials are used for voodoo experiments, and not for normal production. Normal production not only requires a stable supply, but also a large demand for the same type of goods. This is not on the list. Bai Xiaowen paused. When doing experiments, especially when exploring unknown experiments, the experimenter needs to verify many of his ideas. Just like how Edison experimented with thousands of materials when he invented the light bulb, voodoo experimenters also need to constantly change their materials. So, from the frequency of the list, we can see the progress of the experiment. Li Shi understood. In other words, the continuous and strictly worded list of materials means that the other party has reached a bottleneck in the experiment and is in urgent need of materials. And the list of materials that only comes once every 10 to 15 days means that the experiment has already succeeded in a certain stage, and the other party hasn't come up with any new ideas. Bai Xiaowen smiled and nodded. That's right. Then, look at the dates of the 4 lists. The last 3 pickup dates were 3 days ago, 4 days ago, and 6 days ago. The fact that new materials were urgently needed after only 1 or 2 days means that the experimenter is in a bottleneck stage. And it has been 3 days since the last pickup, and the other party hasn't come. This means that the experiment has achieved a certain stage of success, and the other party isn't in urgent need of this batch of materials. This was the basis for Bai Xiaowen's conjecture that the people from the poison sect wouldn't come in a short period of time. It seemed like a guess, but in fact, there was a deeper reason. Of course, this conjecture wasn't 100% accurate. It wouldn't be strange if the experimenter suddenly had a new idea or something like that and suddenly came to the door. Bai Xiaowen's conjecture was only applicable under normal circumstances. The probability was 70% to 80%, but it didn't eliminate the possibility of an accident. Li Shi said with a bit of distress, "What should we do? If the people from the poison sect don't come, we can only wait for them to come. If it exceeds 72 hours, the mission will fail." Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "That's why this mission is rated as an A-rank elite mission." Li Shi pouted and then smiled. "I won't torment my poor brain cells. Anyway, you're here. Last time in the Cane Plain, you were able to complete an S-rank hero mission. This A-rank elite mission should be a piece of cake." Bai Xiaowen spread his hands and said, "Don't say that. The S-rank hero mission last time was mostly due to luck. If it weren't for the zombie doctor's unconventional zombie research that happened to restrain the undead plague, that mission wouldn't have been completed. Even so, the final completion rate was very low. Of course, once an S-rank hero mission was completed, the rewards would be very frightening. Bai Xiaowen's permanent fief order was a direct reward. The permanent party creation tool, the Black Peak Oath, and the opportunity to kill the great chief of the remnant folk, Absalon, and obtain 2 pieces of dark gold equipment, Blood Essence Stone and Dark Gold Shoulder Guard, could also be seen as indirect benefits. Bai Xiaowen told the truth and modestly gestured for Ji to leave. Then, he carefully studied the lists of materials. He had a feeling that there was an invisible thread in these lists. As long as he grasped that thread, this A-rank elite mission would be considered half completed. After reading several times, Bai Xiaowen suddenly stood up. "What's wrong?" Li Shi asked. "I have an idea, but I don't know if it's right." "But it should be very likely," Bai Xiaowen said in a deep voice. "Ask Ji to restrain the members of the Crow organization and strictly control Blackwater Alley. No one is allowed to go out. Come with me." Li Shi followed closely and asked, "What's wrong? Does someone in the Crow organization know the location of the poison sect's stronghold?" No, I'm just in case. I don't want these people to leak the information," Bai Xiaowen said in a low voice. "There's no time to explain. Come with me quickly. I made a mistake. I should have thought of it earlier." Li Shi pursed his lips and didn't ask any more questions. He didn't want to disrupt Bai Xiaowen's train of thought. After instructing Jida, Bai Xiaowen quickly left the Blackwater Alley with Li Shi. Then, they quickly turned right and followed the path they came from. They stepped onto the dilapidated commercial street filled with the stench of sewage. After walking for a while, Bai Xiaowen stopped at a shop at the end of the street. "Phew. Thank goodness. This is the place." Bai Xiaowen saw that the door of the shop was still open. He breathed a sigh of relief, and his furrowed brows relaxed. Chapter 432. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi pushed the door open and entered. "The shop is closed. If you want to buy something, do it early tomorrow," Akaya, who was cleaning up the counter, said without looking up. Bai Xiaowen took a step forward and smiled. "I'm here to make a deal." Hearing this familiar voice, Akaya suddenly looked up, his eyes showing a trace of surprise. "It's you? You should have found the Crow organization." A yellow talisman suddenly appeared in Bai Xiaowen's hand, and he inserted it between Akaya's eyebrows. Spiritual World Rule Notification, warning, you are attempting to attack Akaya, a legal resident of Hodge Town. Your actions will lead to unpredictable consequences. Bai Xiaowen's movements only paused for a moment, then returned to normal. At the same time, in Blackwater Alley. Just as Bai Xiaowen used the confusion talisman, Joshua, who was at the Crow organization's headquarters in Blackwater Alley, suddenly fell to the ground, causing a panic. Joshua fell? Strange, it doesn't look like he fell, it looks like he's dead. This despicable and shameless guy died just in time. How satisfying. From the backyard, Jida walked out. What nonsense are you talking about? Get out of my way. Jida was a level 7 elite, and Bai Xiaowen was supporting him from behind, which increased his prestige. The other members all bowed their heads and avoided him. Jida's pupils shrank when he saw Joshua lying dead in the crowd. He quickly walked 2 steps, squatted down, and checked Joshua's breathing. How is this possible? Jida was terrified, then he gritted his teeth and quickly peeled off Joshua's clothes to check his body, but he didn't find any injuries. It must be that person just now. That's right. Other than him, who else has this kind of ability? The whispers of the people next to him made Jida fearful. He could only attribute Joshua's strange death to Bai Xiaowen. The key was that Joshua didn't have any betrayal, so how did he anger Bai Xiaowen? Or was Bai Xiaowen a cold-blooded person who killed people like flies, and his mood was unpredictable? Those who oppose me will die, and those who obey me will live? For a moment, Jida even thought of abandoning everything and running for his life. This might be a spell from the poison sect. That man has the poison sect's modified giant corpse, and he's also looking for information about the poison sect. He must be related to the poison sect. I've heard that the poison sect's incantations are very bizarre. Once they're cast, they'll be able to take the target's life, no matter how far away they are. I think Joshua isn't the only one who's been cursed. Jida's face turned gloomy when he heard those words. He stood up and reprimanded, "Nonsense. Qiao Shia was obviously killed because of his incompetence. Don't you want to work hard for the Lord and prove your worth? Do you want to follow in Qiao Shia's footsteps?" The others were also frightened by his words. One of them said, "We don't even know that Lord's name, and we don't have his orders. How are we supposed to do anything? Even if my Lord didn't give the order, we should think of a way to take the initiative to attack." Jida gritted his teeth and said, "I remember that apart from investigating the poison sect, my Lord is also very concerned about the missing persons cases. Let's start from this point and think about how we can help my Lord." Bai Xiaowen didn't care about the reactions of Jida and the others. He didn't even know that his unintentional action caused Qiao Shia's death in Blackwater Alley, and that it had become a death example for all the members of the Crow organization. The main reason was that the Crow organization was relatively weak and didn't know anything about missing persons cases. Bai Xiaowen didn't spend much effort on them. Right now, Bai Xiaowen's main focus was on Akaya, who was in front of him. Akaya's eyes were lifeless, and his actions were mechanical. Obviously, he had been successfully bewitched by Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen quickly flipped through Akaya's memory fragments. A minute later, he opened his eyes. Fortunately, the mistake I made earlier wasn't fatal. Or rather, the poison sect's secret base isn't as vigilant as I expected. I now know where the poison sect's base is. Let's talk as we walk. While looking through the list of materials that the poison sect's corpse monster had brought to Blackwater Alley, Bai Xiaowen suddenly thought of something. The place where the poison sect's leader lived was definitely very close to Blackwater Alley. Otherwise, it was hard to imagine that a poison sect's corpse monster would swagger through more than half of the town. It would be strange if it didn't attract the attention of the public security officers and patrols. Since it was close to Blackwater Alley, Bai Xiaowen narrowed down the scope of his thoughts. As the only shop on this street that sold alchemy items, Akaya's cauldron smoothly entered Bai Xiaowen's field of vision. Bai Xiaowen was certain that the poison sect's secret base was definitely related to Akaya's cauldron shop. Moreover, there was a huge connection. Since the poison sect's corpse monster didn't mind searching for materials from underground organizations, then it definitely wouldn't mind coming to the only alchemy shop on this street to buy some necessary alchemy tools. And when the greedy owner Akaya asked about the local secret religious place, he didn't even want to earn gold coins. It was abnormal that he didn't know anything. However, at that time, Bai Xiaowen's attention was still focused on the main mission. After obtaining the information about the Crow organization, he chose to leave. It could be said that he neglected this point. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen thought that he had made a mistake. Thinking about it, if Akaya was vigilant enough, he might have sensed some unfavorable factors from Bai Xiaowen's questions and sent a message to the poison sect's members. If the poison sect's members were alerted, then it would be troublesome. If the other party received the news in advance and was prepared for battle, then it wouldn't be scary. Bai Xiaowen was confident that he could complete an A-rank elite mission and a head-on confrontation. But if the other party directly admitted defeat and chose to run, then he would have to gather information again. And according to Akaya's memory fragments, he didn't choose to warn the poison sect's secret stronghold. When Bai Xiaowen left the shop and went to Blackwater Alley, he stayed in his shop the whole time. This was where the poison sect's vigilance wasn't strong enough. It was also an important reason why Bai Xiaowen's mistake didn't affect the situation. Although this mistake didn't affect the situation, Bai Xiaowen still did some self-reflection. Directly asking the owner Akaya, whose identity was unknown, about this secret religious place was a bit too reckless. After listening to Bai Xiaowen's explanation, Li Shi said with relief, "This mistake. You think it's a mistake, but I don't think so. If it were me, I probably wouldn't have thought that there was a problem with this shop." Bai Xiaowen shook his head. The corner of his mouth slightly curled, revealing a playful smile. Li Shi just happened to look up and saw the smile. He immediately complained, "What are you laughing at? It feels like you're mocking me, a mortal with a low IQ. You're so hateful." "No, if you have a low IQ, then there won't be anyone with a high IQ, Bai Xiaowen hurriedly clarified, and at the same time changed the topic. "The battle is about to start. Although the opponents are few in number, probably only one or two, they should be very strong. In this world of the Black Tide Bitwall, the overall level of the characters is very high. Be careful." When the Crow organization killed Boss Benny, the Wrathclaw's ultimate skill, Li Shi's weapon skills, and the explosive skill of his accessory had all been used. In the next few hours, their combat strength would drop by a level. However, this was something that couldn't be helped. Level 8 Elite Benny had close to 500 HP. It wasn't easy to kill him, especially when he had the invisibility skill. If they didn't decisively use the explosive skill to kill him and let the other members of the Crow organization besiege them, it would be more dangerous. They would often have to pay a high price to escape, and they might not even be able to find clues about the Voodoo sect. The Crow organization looked weak, but after all, it was an underground organization with hundreds of people. To catch the bandits, first catch the leader, quickly kill Benny, and frighten the others. This was the wisest choice. Hearing Bai Xiaowen talk about serious matters, Li Shi quickly nodded. She adjusted her breathing so that it was as light as a leopard. She followed behind Bai Xiaowen and took a detour into the backyard of Aquaya's cauldron. In the backyard, there was a hidden cellar. Because of the memory fragments, Bai Xiaowen easily found the entrance to the cellar and opened the lid. Suddenly, an unpleasant smell wafted out. It seems that the source of the sewage and stench that permeates the entire street is here. Bai Xiaowen muttered to himself. Then, he followed the stairs leading down to the cellar and walked in step by step. After walking down about 40 to 50 steps, Bai Xiaowen finally arrived at the bottom of the cellar. He looked up and saw an empty space in front of him. "Oh my God!" Li Shi exclaimed in the team channel. "Did they hollow out the entire street? This is practically an underground hall. It's better to call it the Voodoo sect's Underground Research Institute." Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and observed the structure of the underground hall in the dim light. There were wall lamps on the four walls of the hall, and whale oil candles were burning. Sealed boxes were placed on the floor, emitting a cold aura, like coffins. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi slowly walked to the end of the hall. In the deepest part of the hall, there was a spacious experiment table. Strong, stitched zombies stood against the wall. However, their eyes were closed and they were motionless. Hello, foolish and bold strangers. Suddenly, a slightly muffled voice sounded. Li Shui looked around. His hands were already on the hilt of his sword. However, he did not find the source of the voice. The voice was very strange. It seemed to be coming from right in front of him, but it also seemed to be coming from all directions. Hello, crazy voodoo sect member. Bai Xiaowen's slender hand gently grasped Li Shui's wrist. His steady hand calmed Li Shui down. Ha ha ha. Correction, I'm not a voodoo sect member. I'm just an alchemist from the voodoo sect. Of course, in front of foolish mortals like you, I'm God. People who call themselves God will never realize how big the gap is between them and God, Bai Xiaowen said with narrowed eyes. According to the code of the Church of Light, God created all things. In my opinion, the method of creating all things is not advanced. Through alchemy, I can turn stones into gold, fish eyes into pearls, and gravel into diamonds. I'm not fundamentally different from God. Hearing this, Bai Xiaowen quickly determined that this voodoo sect alchemist should be a late-stage Chinibu patient. However, Bai Xiaowen increased the speed of his mental search. On the surface, he was still talking nonsense with this Chinibu alchemist. You're wrong. Everything you do is just transformation. It's fundamentally different from God's creation. Most importantly, God was able to create humans and create living beings. Can you do that? Don't use these rotting corpses in your laboratory to make up the numbers. Foolish and ignorant mortals. In my opinion, God's creation is nothing special. The Chinibu alchemist was probably hit on his sore spot. He said angrily, I've already made a preliminary breakthrough. I can give a stitched body some thinking ability. In the future, I'll definitely be able to create life and reach the realm of God. You've finally admitted that you're not God. Bai Xiaowen was the best at seizing the gaps in a conversation. The alchemist's voice paused for a while. However, this alchemist was obviously not stupid. He quickly realized that Bai Xiaowen's goal was to provoke him. As the saying went, if two people quarreled, the serious one would lose. He tried his best to lighten his tone. At least, in front of a mortal like you, my ability can already be considered a miracle. Also, don't bother using your mental search. Your mental power level is far inferior to mine. You won't be able to find me. Is that so? Bai Xiaowen suddenly changed the topic. With a raise of his hand, the tall chubby voodoo-stitched body appeared. He aimed at one of the giant modified corpses in the corner and threw a chain. After a clattering sound, the tip of the chain pierced through the giant modified corpse's stomach. Then, a clear sound of metal clashing could be heard. The meat hook skill was activated, and an oval-shaped sphere was dragged out. Crack! The oval-shaped sphere cracked from the middle, and a short old man less than 1.5 meters tall fell out from it. Fatty's meat hook was also retracted with a clatter. How did you find me? The old man's face was full of surprise. Guess? Bai Xiaowen quickly used insight on the old man. Norton, leader level 8, race, humanoid/human, profession, voodoo alchemist, attributes, strength 25, agility 22, constitution 53, spirit 80, skill 1, poison toss. Norton tosses a concocted poison potion. According to the type of potion, it will have different effects. Skill 2, potion mutation. Norton drinks a concocted mutation potion, causing his body to mutate. He can adjust his own attributes. Skill 3, super antibodies. Norton's body has mutated after a long period of voodoo experimentation. Poison damage received will be reduced by 75%. All other types of magic damage received will be reduced by 30%. Skill 4? Chapter 433. Voodoo alchemist Norton was a spirit-type boss. His strength and dexterity were relatively low, but his highest spirit was 80 points, which was shockingly high. In addition, his 53 points of constitution were not to be underestimated. Among the spirit-type magic-type bosses, he was one of the best. For a boss, each point of constitution meant 1 point of defense and magic resistance. Moreover, as a high-level boss, Norton had an additional 400 points of health points. In this way, he was a powerful boss with 930 points of health points and over 50 points of defense points. It would be very difficult to kill him quickly. Bai Xiaowen quickly analyzed Norton's skills. The first skill was Poison Throw and the third skill was Super Antibodies. One was an offensive skill, while the other was a defensive skill. It was quite normal. The second skill was Mutation Potion. It could actually mutate itself and reconfigure its attributes. It was Bai Xiaowen's first time seeing a boss with this ability. These thoughts flashed through Bai Xiaowen's mind. He raised his hand and quickly summoned his summoned creatures. At this time, Alchemist Norton was still chattering away. This zombie monster of yours is also very special. It doesn't look like a normal zombie monster of the undead species. Instead, it looks like it's from the voodoo sect's alchemy. If you're willing to give this zombie monster to me for research, well, I won't let you go either. After you die, your things will all be mine. Norton asked and answered his own question. Then what should I do first? I'll kill you first and use this zombie monster as my research material. Bai Xiaowen did not say much. The 6 skeleton swordsmen, the Wrath Claw, and Li Shui all rushed forward. Norton took out a bottle from under his dirty robe, shook it a few times, and threw it out with a whoosh. Crack! With a loud explosion, the bottle exploded and a cloud of white mist spread out. Li Shui and his summoned creatures, who were charging forward, all stopped in their tracks. Your summoned creatures have been affected by Poison Throw, Frost Poison. Movement and attack speed have been reduced by 50%. The effect will dissipate after leaving the Frost Poison area for 5 seconds. At this moment, the power of the dash skill could be seen. Li Shui immediately activated Barbaric Charge, her speed increasing as she rammed into Norton, leaving the Frost Poison's area of effect. She then brandished her 2 swords, aiming at Norton with a fierce slash. The Wrathclaw, Skeleton Swordsman, and other summoned creatures were having a hard time. They moved forward slowly as if they were shackled. Norton took 2 of Li Shui's sword strikes. He let out a strange cry and took out another bottle. At the same time, the skeleton warrior brandished its greatsword and activated its skill, Whirlwind Slash. The skeleton warrior dashed straight through the frost poison area and knocked Norton back, causing the potion bottle to fall to the ground. The skeleton warrior was the same as Li Shui. It had the Whirlwind Slash, which allowed it to break free from the frost poison slow. However, Bai Xiaowen didn't use it immediately because of the knockback effect of the Whirlwind Slash. Norton's strength was lower than the skeleton warrior's, so it was within the knockback range of the Whirlwind Slash. However, Bai Xiaowen had missed out on one thing, which was the uniqueness of Norton's poison throw skill. Norton's skill was interrupted, and the potion bottle in his hand fell to the ground. The bottle shattered with a crack, and a strange green mist spread out from under Norton's feet. Your summoned creatures have been affected by poison throw, asphyxiation poison. They will suffer 25 points of poison damage every 3 seconds. The effect will dissipate after leaving the asphyxiation area for 5 seconds. F***CK, the special thing about Poison Toss was that the poisons that Norton tossed out were all concocted in advance. The skeleton warrior's Whirlwind Slash only interrupted Norton's casting action, so Norton couldn't throw the poison out. However, the concocted poison would only fall to the ground after leaving the hand, forming a poison area on the spot. Of course, this bottle of poison wasn't a normal spell. The poisonous cloud form didn't differentiate between friend and foe, and Norton would also suffer damage if he was caught in it. However, Norton had 75% poison damage reduction. He didn't feel uncomfortable at all when the asphyxiation poison enveloped him. Instead, he took a deep breath and closed his eyes, intoxicated. The poison damage he suffered was reduced to about 4 or 5 points every 3 seconds. Magic resistance was calculated first, followed by the poison damage reduction. It was negligible. Norton, who was often immersed in voodoo experiments, wasn't affected much, but Li Shi and his summoned creatures were different. Their magic resistance wasn't as good as Norton's, and they didn't have any damage reduction skills. They could withstand the asphyxiation poison for a short period of time, but they wouldn't be able to withstand it for long. Shi, leave the poison area. Bai Xiaowen withdrew his summoned creatures as he spoke to Li Shi. Ha! You stupid, lowly mortals, why are you running away? Norton laughed proudly. He purposely stood in the asphyxiation poison area and took out a new bottle of poison. Although Norton was Chinibu, he was a leader with high battle intelligence. Since the enemies were all melee types and were afraid of the asphyxiation poison, his best choice was to stand in the poison area. Although he had to suffer about 5 points of poison damage every 3 seconds, it was much more cost-effective than taking the enemy's melee attacks head-on. Bai Xiaowen took a deep breath and put away the spell book of ravings. He held his gun with both hands and fired a shot. The first shot was a 100% critical hit, and it had a penetrating effect that ignored armor. It also had a headshot effect. It directly pierced Norton's eye socket, causing blood to splatter out. This shot alone took away 131 of Norton's HP. The moment the bullet was fired, Bai Xiaowen's dark gold accessory, Absalon's Blood Essence Stone, heated up slightly, and a rough orc shadow pounced out. The Blood Essence Stone's Bloodlust skill was triggered, causing true damage equivalent to 10% of Norton's maximum HP. Right after the -131 number, another -93 number appeared. This terrifying shot directly blinded one of Norton's eyes, causing him to lose his sight forever. Of course, Norton still had another eye that he could use. It was only a partial blindness, not a complete loss of vision. Norton let out a painful roar, and the potion in his hand flew out. It landed on the ground 2 to 3 meters in front of him and exploded. This time, it was a black poisonous cloud. It was impossible to tell what type of poison it was. Unless Bai Xiaowen's summoned creatures walked into it and were poisoned, Bai Xiaowen would receive a notification from the spiritual realm. Of course, Bai Xiaowen did not intend to let his summoned creatures test the poison. After he fired the first shot, he immediately switched to continuous shooting mode. Although his attack power had decreased by 20%, his attack speed had doubled, and bullets whistled through the air. Damn bastard, maggot, rat. Norton covered his eyes and cursed. I'll make you into a specimen. Come out, my servant, and tear these damn bastards apart. Heavy footsteps sounded. The modified giant corpses that were standing against the wall slowly opened their turbid eyes at Norton's call. Step by step, they walked out stiffly and mechanically, mumbling, "Obey." Master's will, the spiritual realm's notification message, Norton's skill, modified giant corpse summoning has been activated. Based on your insight talent, you will receive the following battle information. Modified giant corpse, Norton uses voodoo alchemy to modify the corpse of the dead and command it to fight. The modified giant corpse has the skills Bloat and Poisonous Cloud. Bai Xiaowen used his insight on the modified giant corpse. Sick, Bai Xiaowen squeezed out 2 words from between his teeth. He was shocked to find that although these modified giant corpses only had 2 passive skills, their vitality was shockingly high, and their HP bars were extremely long. They were not inferior to Norton at all. As for the Poisonous Cloud skill, he had already encountered it. It would cause continuous poison damage to nearby melee targets. There were a total of 3 modified giant corpses like this. In other words, there were 3 mobile poisonous gas dischargers in this underground research institute. Coupled with Norton's poisonous gas discharger skill, the already narrow battlefield became even more crowded, greatly reducing the space for Bai Xiaowen, Li Shi, and the summoned creatures to stand. The 3 modified giant corpses slowly approached Bai Xiaowen. Shi, lure the 3 modified giant corpses to the corner. Bai Xiaowen said. According to his experience, these modified giant corpses did not have any combat intelligence. Li Shi agreed and rushed towards one of the modified giant corpses. Despite the pungent poisonous gas on the giant corpse's body, he stabbed with his sword. However, the modified giant corpse actually raised its arm in a very human-like manner, trying to block Li Shi's attack while approaching Bai Xiaowen. It was not distracted by Li Shi at all, and its target was Bai Xiaowen. Norton's eyes were still bleeding, but his face was flushed red, as if he had gone mad. This is my masterpiece. With my efforts, these zombies have gained a preliminary consciousness and the ability to think. They can even use weapons effectively. Just watch, I will soon have an army of intelligent zombies. I will conquer the entire Dark Tide continent and make everyone kneel at the feet of this new god, praising the light of this new god. And you, the one who dares to hurt God, I swear I will use the cruelest means to kill you, and then make your corpse into a specimen. I will let everyone know the consequences of offending God. While roaring, Norton was still throwing out potion bottles, reducing the space for Bai Xiaowen and the others to move. Late-stage Chinibu, Bai Xiaowen muttered, shooting as he retreated. During this time, he triggered the Bloodlust skill of the Blood Essence Stone. Norton's HP had been reduced by more than 400 points in just a few seconds. It was enough to show that Bai Xiaowen, who had the Dark Gold Blood Essence Stone, was able to unleash a terrifying amount of damage with his pistol. When his HP was reduced to 465 points, which was 50%, Norton made a new move. He took out a transparent potion bottle, gritted his teeth and said, "Damn it, this is the result of my latest research." Bai Xiaowen received a notification from the spiritual realm's precepts. Based on your insight talent, you have received the following battle information. Norton's skill, Potion Distortion activated. At this time, Bai Xiaowen had been forced into a corner by the 3 giant zombies, completely blocking his shooting angle. Now's the time. Bai Xiaowen breathed a sigh of relief, and suddenly activated the glide skill that came with his gold equipment. He turned around and stepped on the wall for 2 steps, then with a powerful kick, he rushed towards Norton like a rocket. This kick was so powerful that spiderweb-like cracks appeared on the stone wall. Of course, this was mainly because the glide skill doubled the damage of the kick. Bai Xiaowen used this reaction force to jump over the heads of the 3 giant zombies. He was now about 3 meters above the ground. Fortunately, the dome of the Underground Research Institute was high enough to allow Bai Xiaowen to do this. Otherwise, he would not have been able to jump. Of course, there was a reason why the dome was so high. It was obvious from the size of the giant zombies. In any case, Norton was only using the giant zombies to excavate the Underground Research Institute. He did not need to do anything, he only needed to supervise the work. The giant zombies would not resist, so of course, he could dig with all his might. Bai Xiaowen flew forward for about 10 meters in the air before he gradually began to fall. He immediately activated the glide skill that came with his cloak, reducing his falling speed so that he could glide further. Of course, the speed of gliding was about the same as running on the ground. However, Bai Xiaowen's gliding was not an unnecessary move. The ground was currently filled with poisonous mist. If Bai Xiaowen were to run after landing, he would inevitably step into areas that would slow him down, such as frost poison, and he would not be able to quickly approach Norton. At the same time that Bai Xiaowen activated glide, the skeletal evil arcane master also made his move. He threw out a lightning strike. The skeletal evil arcane master was not the main force in this battle. The main reason was that Norton was not an undead or demon-type creature. Furthermore, Norton had the passive skill, Super Antibodies, that reduced magic damage by 30%. Therefore, the skeletal evil arcane master was not able to activate lightning strike and his damage was reduced by 30%. The skeletal evil arcane master used lightning strike to temporarily stun Norton and interrupt his potion distortion. Bai Xiaowen would definitely not allow Norton to transform. For Bai Xiaowen, who had the insight skill, the spirit-type boss Norton was not scary at all. This was because spirit-type bosses were known for their strange and unpredictable magic effects. Bai Xiaowen's insight skill happened to counter this. In Bai Xiaowen's plan, the initial long-range attacks were only a means to whittle down the boss's HP. It would be good if they could whittle down the boss's HP. However, with the appearance of the 3 giant zombies, it would not be so easy. In the end, they would still have to rely on close combat to end the battle. Even with the asphyxiation poison that dealt 25 poison damage every 3 seconds, it would not be a problem for a short period of time. Chapter 434. Transforming into a body-type boss would greatly increase his HP and defense. This was the most disadvantageous situation for Bai Xiaowen. Transforming into a strength-type boss would greatly increase the difficulty of Bai Xiaowen's combo attacks. The chances of him losing balance, being knocked back, being knocked into the air, and other statuses would greatly decrease. Transforming into an agility-type boss would also be difficult. Agility-type bosses would come and go like the wind, greatly reducing the accuracy of Bai Xiaowen's attacks. The boss's movement speed would greatly increase. How would Bai Xiaowen be able to chase after him while being slowed down by the frost poison agent? Overall, the boss's spirit-type boss was still the most advantageous for Bai Xiaowen's battle plan. After a short stun from the lightning strike, the boss once again raised his hand to drink the transformation potion. At this time, the necromancer raised his hand for the second time and used a Path of Demons skill. Path of Demons was a single target control skill. However, it required the target's willpower to fail in order to take effect. Norton's spirit was extremely high, and his willpower was not weak either. Of course, he would not be affected by the Path of Demons skill. However, a momentary pause was unavoidable. During these 2 pauses, the gliding Bai Xiaowen had already swooped down like a large bird and landed in front of Norton. When Norton raised his hand to drink the potion for the 3rd time, Bai Xiaowen had already stabilized his stance. He twisted his waist and swung his arm, throwing out a flaming punch. After this punch, Norton could no longer drink the potion to transform. Although potion distortion was a skill that did not require a casting time, from the skill's description, it required the user to drink the potion. Under Bai Xiaowen's relentless attacks, Norton could not perform such a simple action. Naturally, he could not transform. Bai Xiaowen's strength was not much higher than Norton's. However, due to his advantage in close combat and Bai Xiaowen's mastery of the ancient martial arts style, he was able to easily complete a combo attack, causing Norton to lose balance, be knocked back, and be knocked into the air. When Bai Xiaowen glided over and beat Norton up, Li Shui and his summoned creatures carefully circled around the area covered by the frost poison and ran to Norton's side. With the addition of Li Shui and his summoned creatures, the continuous attacks on Norton became much easier. Just as Norton was about to make his move, the skeletal shield-bearer sent a shield bash at him, causing him to stagger and not be able to do anything. This was the tragedy of a spirit-type boss. Once a player got close to it, the spirit-type boss would be continuously controlled and would not be able to use any skills. Of course, many high-level bosses that specialized in spirit had their own trump cards. For example, they could silently cast control spells, or silently cast spells such as blink to increase the distance between them. Once the distance was increased, the spirit-type boss's super high damage spells would definitely make the enemy pay a heavy price. More importantly, Norton was a voodoo alchemist. Apart from using potions, he did not have any spells that could allow him to escape. Norton's last hope was the 3 modified giant corpses that he had spent a lot of effort on. They were staggering over to protect their master. Unfortunately, the slowing field created by the frost poison that Norton threw out was still there. The field created by the poison could not differentiate between friend and foe. Although the modified giant corpses had a certain level of intelligence, it was impossible for them to safely avoid the slowing field like Li Shui and Bai Xiaowen's summoned creatures. Their bloated bodies made it difficult for them to do so. A series of miserable howls came from Norton's mouth. His health points dropped rapidly. When the 3 modified giant corpses passed through the slowing field and were only about 10 meters away from Norton, another tall and bloated body appeared in front of them. The voodoo alchemist Fatty had been waiting for a long time. Behind Fatty, there were 2 skeletal shield-bearers. The skeletal shield-bearers drew their swords and slashed at Fatty's sturdy butt from both sides. Of course, under Bai Xiaowen's control, these 2 slashes only caused single-digit damage. The purpose of these 2 slashes was simple. It was to trigger Fatty's Blood of Corruption skill. Under the influence of the Blood of Corruption, the 3 modified giant corpses' movement speed was reduced again. They were now as slow as a tortoise. They were either roaring or muttering as they advanced, clashing head-on with Fatty and the skeletal shield-bearers. The modified giant corpses had high vitality and high health points. However, their attack power was weak. They mainly relied on their poisonous fog skill to harass enemies within close range. They were like 3 large pieces of sticky candy. In a sense, Fatty's tactical position was very similar to the modified giant corpses. With the help of the 2 skeletal shield-bearers, it was basically impossible for the modified giant corpses to bypass Fatty. They could only attack. Their slow and feeble fists continuously swung out. This bit of damage was nothing to Fatty. It was enough for Fatty to continue stacking the Blood of Corruption. When the 2 skeletal shield-bearers were attacked, they would block if they could. If they could not block, they would just hide behind Fatty's butt. One of the modified giant corpses growled in a low voice. It suddenly took a step to the side, grabbed a warhammer from the weapon rack by the wall, and swung it with all its might. Fatty was hit by the hammer. A piece of his skin and flesh was swept off. This damage was much higher than when he was empty-handed. The other 2 modified giant corpses also ran to the weapon rack by the wall. One of them grabbed a giant sword, while the other grabbed a giant axe. They slashed wildly at Fatty. This old man wasn't bluffing. The modified giant corpses really do have a certain level of combat intelligence. They can even grab weapons and equipment for themselves. Bai Xiaowen whispered as he surrounded Norton. Fatty shouldn't be able to hold on for long. Let's end this quickly. Li Shui nodded. She was already attacking with all her might. The mark of thunder that she had been accumulating for a long time suddenly exploded, causing an additional 70 points of damage. This caused a high value of 114 points of damage to appear. Norton screamed. Li Shui's sword exploded with the mark of thunder, cutting off a large piece of his flesh. Fresh blood dripped down. His HP had dropped to a dangerously low red line. Damn it. I'll bury you with me. A rumbling sound was heard. The entire dome of the Underground Research Institute began to fall down. Gradually, small pieces of debris fell down. This was a mechanism that Norton had set up when he built the Underground Research Institute. To prevent his research results from falling into the hands of others, he had installed a self-destruct mechanism for the Underground Research Institute. This was underground. Once the dome fell, the consequences would be unimaginable. Bai Xiaowen's final punch emptied Norton's HP. A large golden treasure chest condensed and was picked up by Bai Xiaowen. Chapter 435. When Norton fell, the 3 giant modified corpses also lost their ability to move and froze in place. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shui were out of combat mode at the same time. Bai Xiaowen recalled the summoned creatures and carefully avoided the area covered by the frost poison. Then, he ran with Li Shui, one in front of the other. Along the way, they passed by sealed coffin-shaped boxes and arrived at the stairs leading out of the cellar. Large chunks of mud and stone fell, but Bai Xiaowen and Li Shui still managed to safely escape the Underground Research Institute and return to the surface. After rushing out of the cellar, the 2 could feel the ground rumbling as if it was the precursor of an earthquake. The Underground Research Institute that Norton had excavated covered a vast area, almost emptying out the entire street. The collapse of the Underground Research Institute was no different from a small-scale earthquake. Now, there were already cracks on the ground of the street. The other residents screamed and ran out. With a loud bang, the Underground Research Institute completely collapsed, and smoke and dust rose everywhere. Half of the street collapsed, and the ground sank by 5 or 6 meters. Huge cracks spread on the ground, and it was a scene of devastation. Under the collapsed houses, there were screams and cries for help. Many of the residents of Hodgetown who had not managed to escape in time were suppressed. "Oh my God!" Li Shi exclaimed. "What should we do now?" Bai Xiaowen glanced at Li Shi. He could understand what Li Shi was thinking. He probably wanted to evacuate and rescue the innocent residents, but he was worried that Bai Xiaowen had other plans. Therefore, he looked at Li Shi inquisitively. Bai Xiaowen nodded slightly. "Save them. See how many people are still alive under the collapsed houses. Save as many as you can." Li Shi agreed, but he felt a little strange. He smiled and said, "You don't seem like such a caring person." Bai Xiaowen smiled faintly. "Hurry up. We'll be in contact with the sheriff of Hodgetown soon." Li Shi had an epiphany and curled his lips at Bai Xiaowen. Then, he trotted to the side of Akaya's cauldron, lifted a collapsed wall, and pulled out a resident of Hodgetown. Bai Xiaowen summoned the skeleton swordsman and other creatures again, and also joined in the rescue mission. After the Underground Research Institute collapsed, Bai Xiaowen received a notification. A-rank elite side mission, the secret of the voodoo sect has been completed. Degree of completion, S. Based on your completion evaluation, you've received 10,000 mana points as a reward. Your reputation in the poison sect has dropped significantly. Current reputation level, hostile. Your reputation with the Radiant Church has increased. Current reputation level, friendly. Your party gained 400 EXP, the party's EXP increased the level of the elite party. Bai Xiaowen didn't care too much about it, because the main reward of the A-rank elite side mission was Combat EXP, Awaken level up. After the mission was completed, Bai Xiaowen's Combat EXP bar rose to 68% of level 5. Li Shi's leveling speed was even faster. He was already at 81% of level 5. Bai Xiaowen had stayed in the Dead Soul Lake for a few days to practice his combat skills and specialties. He had earned a few more days of combat EXP than Li Shi, but now, Li Shi had surpassed him. Compared to hero classes, elite classes leveled up faster. A series of footsteps sounded, followed by a loud voice. Team 1, Team 2, rescue the victims in groups of 2. The rest of you, evacuate with me. Send the injured to an open area. Bai Xiaowen glanced at the direction of the street. A group of neatly dressed, fully armed soldiers quickly spread out under the command of a strong, burly man. They carried out the rescue work in an orderly manner. This burly man must be the sheriff of Hodgetown, Ahan. Bai Xiaowen's skeleton sword and shield was an undead summon creature. It was very conspicuous in the scene. Ahan, who was in charge, quickly noticed it. An undead creature? Ahan quickly walked in front of Bai Xiaowen and sized him up. You're the master of these monsters? An undead summoner? Strange, I think I've seen you before. Just... Mr. Sheriff, let's talk later. Right now, I just want to save people. Bai Xiaowen ignored Ahan and turned his head to call Li Shi. Charlotte, help me lift this pillar. Spirit World Rule notification. Frowny face. Hodgetown Sheriff, Alexei Ahan's favorability towards you has increased. Current favorability level, neutral. This feeling of insulting a spirit realm expert and increasing his favorability was very satisfying. Ahan didn't get angry. Instead, he quickly stepped forward, grabbed the pillar with one hand, and gently lifted it onto his shoulder. Then, he motioned for Bai Xiaowen to drag out the injured person under the pillar. Bai Xiaowen's eyes twitched. Hodgetown's buildings were mainly made of earth and stone. This stone pillar probably weighed 3 to 4 tons. Yet, Ahan was able to lift it with one hand so easily. One could only imagine his strength. However, Bai Xiaowen didn't have any strange expression. After rescuing the injured person, he immediately rushed to the next ruined building. He was extremely busy. However, he still secretly used insight on Sheriff Ahan. Alexei Ahan, leader level 8, race, humanoid/human, profession, Great War Hero, attributes, STR-79, DX-30, Con 50, WIL 20, Skill 1, Brute Force, passive skill. When Ahan uses a two-handed weapon, his damage will be increased by an additional 20%. Additional true damage will be dealt to targets with less than 60% of his strength. There's also a chance to inflict a crippling effect. Skill 2, Unyielding. Ahan's strength will be increased by an additional 10% every time he is affected by a debuff or control skill. This effect will last until the end of the battle state. This effect can be stacked up to 3 times. Skill 3, Battle Roar. Ahan lets out an inspiring roar, increasing the attack power of all allies within 100 meters by 10 points. Lasts for 30 seconds. Skill 4. Skill 5, Firmwell Level 3. Ahan's HP will be increased by an additional 500 points. The duration of abnormal statuses and control effects will be reduced by 50%. The Black Tide Realm. Where did it come from? Even a sheriff is so powerful. Bai Xiaowen muttered to himself. This sheriff named Ahan was a complete waste of talent to be the sheriff of a town. First of all, he had explosive attributes, and then he had an army skill like Battle Roar. Coupled with a violent damage output skill like Brute Force, he would definitely be a fierce general on the battlefield. What also surprised Bai Xiaowen was Ahan's general skill. As a high-level leader, it was normal for him to have a toughness skill that increased his HP and reduced control effects. However, this skill of Ahan's was actually level 3. What did this mean? In the treasure space of the Dead Soul Lake, the chief of the Naga tribe, Alicia's Naga leader skill was only level 2. Bai Xiaowen now understood why the ticket was prefixed with the word speculation and reduced the difficulty of the main mission by 50%. This Sheriff Ahan was definitely a person with a story and was not easy to fool. If Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi had rashly appeared as strangers and contacted Ahan, they might not have been able to win the sheriff's trust. Instead, they might have been treated as suspicious people. Now, it was much easier. The two of them and Ahan were neighbors on the same street, so Ahan had some impression of them. The difficulty of winning Ahan's trust was much lower. After gaining Ahan's trust, the work of solving the missing persons case was simple. Bai Xiaowen only needed to solve the riddle. When it was time to fight, he just needed to close the door and release the sheriff. Then, the opponent would type GG. In this collapse, there were more than 70 injured people and 3 dead people, including the boss of Akaya's Cauldron, Mr. Akaya. You two come with me and tell me what happened. Ahan called Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi to the side. I remember now. You two are siblings who live on Windmill Street, right? Why are you here? My intuition tells me that this incident should be related to you too. Li Shi secretly glanced at Bai Xiaowen. It was best to leave the work of dealing with the powerhouses of the spiritual world to Bai Xiaowen. We came all the way here to investigate the recent missing persons case. Bai Xiaowen's voice was somewhat low, and there was a trace of unconcealable regret on his handsome face. Missing persons case? You found the culprit? Ahan asked in surprise. Bai Xiaowen nodded. Yes, the culprit behind the missing persons case is a voodoo sect alchemist. He has a secret evil laboratory under the commercial street. I saw with my own eyes that he pieced together the corpses of the deceased to create a giant corpse and conduct inhumane experiments. My sister and I fought fiercely with him and spent a lot of effort to kill him. But I didn't expect that before he died, he activated the mechanism that caused the underground laboratory to collapse. Bai Xiaowen sighed, looking as if he regretted his actions. Ahan's blade-like brows furrowed, and he turned to the patrol soldiers and shouted, "Clean up the street. There is an evil underground laboratory here. Dig it out." A group of elite and ordinary soldiers responded loudly and continued to work without any complaints. From this, it could be seen that Ahan's management of the patrol team was very effective. In other words, he had the talent to manage an army. Bai Xiaowen was well aware that Ahan still had a trace of doubt about him, which was why he ordered the excavation. But it didn't matter. When the laboratory was dug out, Ahan would definitely believe him. A clever way to tell a lie was to tell 9 truths with 1 lie. In Bai Xiaowen's statement, the voodoo sect alchemist, the evil laboratory, the giant corpse, and so on were all true. But there was one lie, and that was the motive, or rather, the starting point. Bai Xiaowen knew very well that the voodoo sect alchemist Norton had nothing to do with the missing persons case. His motive for finding Norton was the secret of the voodoo sect mission. However, in Ahan's eyes, as long as the information about the voodoo sect and the giant corpse was true, then he would naturally believe Bai Xiaowen's motive. This was the advantage of telling 9 truths and 1 lie. There were better ways to tell a lie than 9 truths and 1 lie. That was to tell the whole truth, but hide the most important 1 or 2 sentences, causing the other party to misunderstand and go astray. But in this case, there was no need for such a sophisticated way of lying. Before long, the patrol soldiers came to report that they had dug out broken alchemy tools, boxes containing corpses, and so on. Ahan's gaze towards Bai Xiaowen became much friendlier. He nodded and said, "Since you destroyed the voodoo sect's evil laboratory for the sake of Hodgetown's safety, then I won't hold you responsible for this incident. But if you encounter such a thing in the future, you have to inform me in advance. You and your brother are also residents of Hodgetown and are under my protection. Rashly coming to the voodoo sect's villains is too reckless. I don't want to see another name added to the list of missing people." Bai Xiaowen sincerely apologized. "It won't happen again. In the future, as long as we discover something dangerous that could affect the safety of Hodgetown, we will report it immediately." Ahan asked again, "I'm a bit surprised by your skills. You two have always been apprentices at the bread mill, right? I didn't expect you to have such strength." Bai Xiaowen made up a lie, saying that he had met a wandering adventurer and saw that the siblings were talented, so he gave them some guidance and so on. Afterwards, the siblings had always followed their teacher's instructions and didn't easily reveal their strength, living an ordinary life in this town. It wasn't until the disappearance case occurred that the siblings decided to come forward and investigate the truth. Under normal circumstances, Ahan most likely wouldn't believe Bai Xiaowen's lie. However, Bai Xiaowen and his sister were residents of Hodgetown and lived on the same street as him, so there was a basic level of trust. In addition, the voodoo sect's evil laboratory that had just been excavated also confirmed that Bai Xiaowen wasn't lying. Therefore, Ahan accepted Bai Xiaowen's explanation and didn't probe further. At the mention of the missing people case, Ahan sighed and said, "Let's go. I want to see the corpses in those sealed boxes with my own eyes. If the voodoo sect is behind the missing people case, then I can answer to the mayor and the people of Hodgetown." He shook his head and sighed. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi followed behind Ahan. Li Shi asked through the team channel, "It's strange. From Ahan's perspective, he should be happy that the missing people case has been solved. Why does he look a bit depressed? It's a good thing that the case has been solved, but the missing people have all turned into corpses. With so many dead people, it's reasonable that he's in a bad mood. Besides, he wasn't the one who solved the case. As a police officer, no, as a sheriff, Mr. Ahan must be very disappointed." Chapter 436. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi's conversation was carried out through the team channel, so Ahan, who was walking in front, didn't know anything about it. This was one of the benefits of establishing a permanent team. As long as teammates were within a certain distance, they could secretly transmit information. It was similar to the secret sound transmission in wuxia novels, and they didn't have to worry about being intercepted by experts. Sealed wooden boxes that looked like coffins were excavated from the ruins. Many of the wooden boxes had been smashed into pieces. Ahan stood in front of a wooden box and opened the lid. A faint stench of a corpse wafted out. Inside the wooden box was a man's corpse. Ahan carefully examined it. Bai Xiaowen noticed that his thick eyebrows were tightly knitted together again. "Is there a problem?" Bai Xiaowen asked in a low voice. Ahan shook his head and said, "No." Bai Xiaowen just happened to cast a puzzled look at him. "I mean, there's something wrong with this corpse," Ahan muttered. "This corpse has been stored for several years. As for the missing persons case, it only started in the last 2 months. That's impossible. A corpse that has been stored for several years should have rotted long ago, Bai Xiaowen questioned. Han didn't get angry at being questioned. Instead, he took out a light yellow powder from the wooden box and said, "The mystery lies in here. This is incorruptible powder, a gadget that many alchemists can make. It can prevent a corpse from rotting for many years. Of course, it has to be in a sealed environment for it to be effective. If the lid is opened, the corpse will rot after a while." Bai Xiaowen pondered for a moment and understood. The decomposition of a corpse was caused by the reproduction of microorganisms. This incorruptible powder should be a chemical that killed microorganisms. Moreover, in a sealed environment, moisture and air couldn't enter. Naturally, there was no space for microorganisms to reproduce, so the corpse naturally wouldn't rot. The alchemy of the spiritual realm could often be explained by scientific methods. Although Bai Xiaowen understood, he couldn't show his agreement. Instead, he pretended to be unwilling. "Maybe there's something wrong with this corpse, but what about the other corpses?" Han smiled. He probably thought that this unwilling youth was quite interesting, so he led the two of them to continue examining the corpses stored in the other boxes. As expected, the corpses in these boxes had been stored for many years. How is this possible? I thought that the alchemist was the mastermind, and Hodge Town would be able to regain its peace. How could this be? Bai Xiaowen murmured, looking as if he had lost his soul. Li Shi turned his face away and tried his best to control his expression. Han was completely deceived by Bai Xiaowen's acting skills. He patted Bai Xiaowen's shoulder and said, "Actually, you don't have to be sad. The poison sect was an evil sect to begin with. Desecrating the corpses of the dead for forbidden experiments was a crime in itself. I have to thank you for helping Hodge Town find and destroy this tumor of the poison sect." After a pause, Han continued, "You don't have to worry. I'll lead the patrol team to investigate the inside story of the missing persons case. I, Alexei Ahan, hereby swear that I will find those criminals and protect the people of Hodge Town." Bai Xiaowen immediately said, "Mr. Sheriff, we also want to participate in the investigation. As long as these villains are not caught, I won't be at ease." Han said with gratification, "I've seen your ability from the destruction of the poison sect's lair. I accept your participation." The spirit world's loss prompted, Hodge Town Sheriff, Alexei Ahan, agrees to your participation in the search for the missing persons case. You've received a special item, Patrol Team Nameplate. With this nameplate, you can walk freely in Hodge Town during the curfew. You've received permission to enter the sheriff's mansion and read the information on the missing persons case. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi looked at each other, seeing the excitement in each other's eyes. With this, the main mission was on the right track. The only thing left was to solve the mystery, which was Bai Xiaowen's strength. Next, Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi went directly to Sheriff Ahan's house and enjoyed a sumptuous dinner. Ahan's wife was quite beautiful. Her name was Jenny, and she had the temperament of a lady from a wealthy family. Han proudly introduced Jenny as the daughter of the mayor of Hodge Town. She was gentle and intelligent, and had been pursued by many young people of status in Hodge Town. Han had defeated a dozen rivals in love before he won Jenny's heart. Of course, Bai Xiaowen didn't care about Han's wife. He was more concerned about the treasure chest dropped by crazy alchemist Norton. After dinner, Bai Xiaowen asked for a rest, saying that he was tired. Han's house was quite spacious. He was a hospitable person, and had his wife, Jenny, clean up an empty room for Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi to stay. That night, Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi sat opposite each other and took out the large golden treasure chest dropped by Norton. Bai Xiaowen put his hand on the chest. Bai Xiaowen's battle score for killing the poison sect's alchemist, Norton, was A. Therefore, Bai Xiaowen had 3 draws. This rating was a bit low, because Norton was a level 8 boss, and Bai Xiaowen was only level 5. There was a huge gap between them, and there was also the crucial threshold of leveling up from level 6 to level 7. However, judging from their strength, the gap wasn't more than 3 times, so it was impossible for them to get an S rating. A total of 20 golden cards flew out of the treasure chest and floated in the air in 2 neat rows. Li Shi tapped one first. You've received a special item, Frost Poison Formula. Frost Poison Formula teaches you how to make frost poison. Requires a level 7 alchemist, apothecary, to learn. Frost Poison Effect creates a field of frost that slows down the movement and attack speed of all targets, regardless of friend or foe, within the field. The value is related to your alchemist, apothecary, level. The higher the level, the greater the reduction. The effect will dissipate after leaving the frost poison area for 5 seconds. Bai Xiaowen's eyes lit up. Not bad, not bad. It's a pity that my apothecary level is only level 4.5. I still need to work hard to reach level 7. If apothecary wanted to level up, he could only use a large number of potions to increase his proficiency. Bai Xiaowen didn't focus on making potions. In his free time, he only made a few bottles of potions and auctioned them for Super Godly Potion Shop to increase its popularity and advertise. Therefore, his apothecary level hadn't been high. Chapter 437. Bai Xiaowen drew the second gold card. Notification: you've received a special item, scribbled research notes. Bai Xiaowen tried to read the notes, but unfortunately, he received a new notification. Reading the notes requires a certain amount of knowledge and expertise. The item can only be read once. It will disappear after reading. Do you want to open it? Bai Xiaowen shook his head and gave up on reading the notes. He did not want to regret it because of a moment of curiosity. Why don't you open it? You're a potion master, and Norton is an alchemist. You should meet the requirements, right? Li Shi asked. Bai Xiaowen shook his head and said, let's not try it. I know how bad my potion master foundation is. There's no need to waste this one and only chance. Moreover, I already have a candidate to read the notes. Let's continue with the last card. Li Shi tapped on it, and the image of an equipment appeared in the golden light. Filthy Shroud, bound after equipping, quality, hero, gold, equipment position, back, equipment requirements, none, attributes, back armor +3, evasion rate +3%, additional skill, greasy, passive. Physical attacks from the back have a 100% chance of deflecting, reducing damage by 40%. Fire damage received is increased by 30%. Durability description: tailor-made for those who are eccentric, perverted, and dark. A black, foul-smelling, unidentified object appeared in Bai Xiaowen's hand. After unfolding it, it became a wrinkled cloak. Li Shi did not know how to describe it. He looked at the cloak with disdain. Damn it. It's not easy to get a gold item, and it's this kind of item. It's so ugly. Bai Xiaowen did not mind the ugly appearance of the shroud. He carefully read the additional skill, greasy, and gave his evaluation. This equipment's additional passive skill is actually quite good. It reduces physical attacks from the back by 40%. Although there's the negative effect of fire damage, magic damage is rarer than physical damage, and even rarer for fire spells. When facing assassins or fleeing for your life, the value of this equipment is comparable to dark gold. Awakened ones have the ability to actively parry and block physical attacks according to their strength, agility, and other attributes, as well as the level of their combat expertise. This can effectively reduce physical damage. However, regardless of whether it was parry or block, they were only effective against attacks from the front. Attacks from the back could not be parried or blocked. If they could not dodge the attacks, they could only rely on their defense and HP to endure the damage. Therefore, the damage received from an attack on the back was usually higher, and it was easy for a critical hit to occur. Many assassins like to sneak up behind their opponents and ambush them from behind. This piece of equipment was very effective against assassins. In addition, when escaping, one's back must be facing the enemy. With a cloak that reduced physical damage by 40%, one would be more resistant to attacks, greatly increasing the chances of escaping alive. However, Bai Xiaowen then said, "This equipment isn't suitable for the two of us." Fortunately, it was bound to the player after equipping it, so it could be traded. Those awakened ones who cherish their lives and don't care about their image would definitely be willing to pay a good price for this equipment. Bai Xiaowen advocated offense. For him, selling his back to the opponent would only make him die faster, so he didn't want this equipment. Li Shi's radiant cloak had a good AoE blinding skill, so she was also reluctant to replace it. Of course, Bai Xiaowen couldn't bear to let Beauty Li pinch her nose and wear this equipment. After the 3 draw chances were used, the treasure chest disappeared. However, in the place where the treasure chest disappeared, a transparent potion bottle floated in the air, glowing faintly. Bai Xiaowen stretched out his hand to grab it and received a notification. Frowny face, you have obtained a special item, Distortion Potion. Distortion Potion. After drinking, you can temporarily adjust your attributes for 120 seconds. During the adjustment process, your total attributes will not change. The adjustment range for each attribute is between 22 and 50 points. Behind the description, there was a line of small words. Frowny face, this item can only be dropped by killing the voodoo alchemist Norton. Norton has never entered the second stage. After this condition is met, this item will definitely be dropped, and it will not occupy the loot lottery list. This is the distortion potion that Norton was going to drink after his HP was reduced to 50%, Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. Fortunately, he didn't drink it. Otherwise, it wouldn't have dropped. It seems that the effect of this potion is still very strong. Even if it takes up a battle's potion usage, it's worth it. A battle started with entering combat state and ended with exiting combat state. During a battle, only 1 bottle of combat potion could be used, such as the Silver Light Potion, which could restore HP, or the Bull's Strength Potion, which could increase HP. The same limit applied to combat food. Combat food could only be used once in a battle, regardless of whether it was a dispelling or recovery type. Of course, the usage of combat potions and combat food did not conflict with each other. This was also the reason why awakened ones would purchase a certain amount of recovery food such as rye bread before they prepared to enter the spiritual realm. As for entering and exiting combat state, it was determined by the rules of the spiritual realm. When a target made a threatening action or had an offensive tendency, including, but not limited to, chasing, attacking, coercion, etc., they would enter combat state. There were 2 ways to exit combat state. The first was to kill the target that made a threatening action, and the second was for the target to give up their offensive tendency. For example, the target would stop chasing, give up attacking, cancel coercion, and so on. This bottle of distortion potion also had no binding restrictions. Bai Xiaowen handed it to Li Shi and saw that the attribute adjustment range had changed to 1539. He nodded and said, "The adjustment range is based on our own attributes. Put this bottle of potion in the team's shared storage space. Whoever uses it will depend on the tactical arrangement." Li Shi nodded and had no objections. After resting, early the next morning, Bai Xiaowen used the militia nameplate of the patrol team to ask for detailed information about the missing person case. Ahan happily agreed to his request and led Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi to the archives room. He placed all the information about the case on the desk for Bai Xiaowen to read. The information was mainly about the missing person's age, gender, family, and other personal information. There was also some investigation of the scene of the disappearance, the oral accounts of the surrounding residents, and so on. Chapter 438. Bai Xiaowen didn't ask Ahan to stay either. He knew that the main mission of the missing person's case still depended on Ahan to solve the mystery. Bai Xiaowen spent the entire morning in the archives room, carefully flipping through the information. The information he read wasn't limited to the 13 missing residents, but all the information in Hodgetown's archives room. There were more than 30,000 registered legal residents in Hodgetown, so it was obviously impossible to look through each and every one of them. When Bai Xiaowen browsed through the list, he also listed some of the wealthier, nobler, and more influential families in Hodgetown as his focus. Other than that, he also listed the families that had undergone major changes in the past 2 months. Did you find anything? Li Shi hadn't been idle. He had been acting as Bai Xiaowen's assistant. When Bai Xiaowen finished browsing, he frowned and immediately asked. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and said, "There were some unexpected discoveries. I now suspect that the missing persons case has something to do with the patrol team under Ahan." Huh. Li Shi had a good impression of the sheriff, Ahan. When he heard Bai Xiaowen's words, he was shocked. "Are you saying that Ahan is a thief pretending to be a thief?" "Ahan doesn't look like such a person," Bai Xiaowen said. "Ahan himself probably doesn't know. I mean, there should be a mole in the patrol team." After a pause, Bai Xiaowen pointed at the information of the 13 missing residents and said, "After Hodge Town implemented the curfew system, the patrol team patrolled at night, but there were still new cases of missing residents. Every time, it happened in the patrol team's blind spot. It could be said that they perfectly avoided the patrol team. This is quite strange." After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said, "This alone doesn't mean anything. However, from the information of the missing residents, the missing people all have some common characteristics. First, they are healthy and don't have any diseases. Second, they are middle-aged and in the prime of their lives. Third, they are mostly men. From these common characteristics, we can infer the motive of the mastermind behind the kidnapping." Li Shi thought for a moment and said, "Human experiments?" Bai Xiaowen smiled and said, "Don't let the Norton incident mislead you. Human experiments required samples of all ages and genders. Therefore, the culprit shouldn't be doing human experiments. In my opinion, it's more like they're keeping slaves." Li Shi, slaves? When I was studying the history of Earth in the Christian era, I learned about the black slave trade. The black people in Africa were sent to the newly developed United States to be serfs. Bai Xiaowen nodded and said, "That's right. I think there must be a slave trade going on behind the scenes in Hodge Town. The kidnapped residents definitely can't be kept in Hodge Town. They must be transported to other places, or else it would be too easy to be exposed. In order to support such a slave trade without being discovered, it must be someone who holds the public power of Hodge Town and has a strong influence. So you think there's something wrong with the patrol team?" Li Shi followed Bai Xiaowen's train of thought. "The captain of the patrol team is Ahan, and he should be very talented in running an army. He shouldn't be unaware that his subordinates are doing such a big thing behind his back. Could it be that our main mission is to deal with Ahan in the end?" Bai Xiaowen shook his head again and denied it. "It can't be Ahan." Li Shi blinked. "Do you still remember the prefix of our ticket? Isn't one of them called speculation?" Bai Xiaowen explained, "Where does the 50% reduction in the difficulty of the main mission manifest?" "From what I understand, this 50% reduction in difficulty manifests in the area where we live. We live on the same street as Ahan, and he has some impression of us, so he accepts us very well. This is also the reason why we can live in Ahan's house." After a pause, Bai Xiaowen continued, "Therefore, Ahan is an important NPC in the main mission. According to the rules of the spiritual realm, having Ahan's implicit trust is equivalent to completing 50% of the main mission. This shows how important and powerful he is. If the main mission is to deal with Ahan in the end, then where does the 50% reduction in difficulty manifest in the prefix speculation?" Li Shi believed that Bai Xiaowen inferred that Ahan had nothing to do with the mastermind behind the missing persons case based on this off-site information. After eliminating this possibility, she thought about it. "So you just focused on the files of the influential and powerful families in Hodge Town in order to find the dealer of the slave trade? Did you find it?" Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes slightly. "Unfortunately, most of the influential families in Hodge Town aren't at the level to support the slave trade. After eliminating many possibilities, there's only one left, and it's also the one that Ahan finds the most difficult to accept. There's this possibility. Don't keep me in suspense." Li Shi grabbed Bai Xiaowen's hand and shook it. "Hurry up and tell me." "The mayor of Hodge Town, Hiram David's family." Li Shi said in surprise, "Isn't that Jenny's family?" Hiram, the mayor, is Ahan's father-in-law, right? That's right. But, why would the Davids do this? Logically speaking, they're the rulers of Hodgetown, and a stable Hodgetown should be in their best interests. Now that the town is in a state of panic and the market is depressed after the curfew, the Davids will lose their interests. Li Shui could see this point clearly. Don't worry. I'm just suspecting. I don't have conclusive evidence yet. The fulcrum of all this logic is based on the inference of the slave trade, Bai Xiaowen said. We don't have to reveal this to Ahan for the time being. Let's investigate it ourselves first. This time, Bai Xiaowen finally found some clues after looking through the information. He and Li Shi passed through the bread mill on Windmill Street and walked to the Davids' mansion in the north of town. 2 militiamen were standing in front of the gate of the Davids' mansion. Bai Xiaowen tried to enter, but was stopped by the militiamen. Stop, you don't have permission to enter. Bai Xiaowen blinked and took out the militia patrol nameplate. This is not a valid pass, the militiamen said seriously. If you have personal matters to discuss with Mayor Hiram, please make an appointment in advance. But I have to remind you that Mayor Hiram is rarely willing to see guests, especially a young boy like you who has no status. Bai Xiaowen said, Hey, your helmets are so cool. Can you lend them to me? Let me tell you, I also want to be a sentinel. The 2 sentinels looked at Bai Xiaowen as if he were an idiot. Then, they pushed and shoved Bai Xiaowen 10 meters away from the gate. Go away, don't get in our way. Okay, I'll go. Bai Xiaowen shrugged. Chapter 439. Bai Xiaowen sat outside the high wall of the mayor's house like a stone statue. It was not until evening that he stood up and opened his eyes. Li Shi had been keeping a lookout for him. When he saw Bai Xiaowen stand up, he quickly asked, How is it? Did you find anything? I was worried that I would be discovered for such a long time. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile, The mayor's study has a magic alarm device. The shadow assassin was almost exposed. Fortunately, I framed a cat, so the guards did not suspect me. I could only wait until the moment Mayor Hiram himself entered the study, and then I sneaked in. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen said, Fortunately, my hard work was not in vain. I now conclude that there is something wrong with Hiram. Is there any evidence? There is no direct evidence, but Hiram's behavior is very suspicious. In the study, he has been flipping through a book called Tyrell's Selected Works, Bai Xiaowen said. Normal reading is done slowly, page by page, or quickly. However, Mayor Hiram turned the pages quickly, stopped to compare, and then quickly turned the pages again, and compared again. He is too purposeful. After hearing what you said, it does not sound like normal reading. It is a bit like a secret signal, Li Shi said. Bai Xiaowen nodded. The page that he compared to was filled with sentences from Tyrell's Selected Works. They looked like excerpts, but in fact, they should be a secret code for connecting sentences. Now that we have determined that there is something wrong with him, how do we get the evidence next? Li Shi frowned and pondered. If only we could get that page, we could study the content of his secret signal from it. Bai Xiaowen laughed. It is not difficult. I know the content on that page is very important, so I memorized it. Li Shi was speechless. Bai Xiaowen laughed. Let's go back to Sheriff Ahan's house and find a copy of Tyrell's Selected Works. Let's study the secret hidden in Mr. Mayor's secret signal. The 2 of them walked back. As they walked past an alley, Bai Xiaowen suddenly frowned. He turned around and shouted, Who's there? Come out. Li Shi put his hand on the hilt of his sword. Sir, it's me. Cheetah shrunk his neck and walked out of the alley. His expression was one of fear. Are you following me? Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes, revealing a dangerous glint. Cheetah hurriedly said, My lord, I wouldn't dare to follow you. I came here specifically to find you. It's just that you've been at the sheriff's house all this time, so you didn't have a chance yesterday. Speak. Why are you looking for me? Cheetah said carefully, On behalf of all the members of the Crow organization, I am willing to pledge my loyalty to you, my lord. We are still useful, I hope that you can let us live. At first, Bai Xiaowen was a little surprised. The change in the Crow organization's style was indeed a little unexpected. However, Bai Xiaowen immediately thought of his servant Joshua who had died. He roughly understood what Jida and the others were thinking. They thought that he was a temperamental master who killed people easily. Although Bai Xiaowen did not think that the Crow organization could be of any use, it was still a good thing that Jida was willing to pledge his loyalty. He nodded and said, I understand. Then let me ask you a question. Jida felt a chill down his spine and nodded repeatedly. Go and get me a book. The title is Tyrell's Selected Works. My time is limited. The sooner the better, Bai Xiaowen said. Bai Xiaowen had thought that this was a simple request, but Jida had a bitter expression on his face. My lord, those kinds of poems and anthologies are just for the nobles to put on a facade. A lowly person like me doesn't have the means to get them. Hodgetown doesn't have any bookstores that specialize in selling books. The nobles buy books from traveling caravans. My lord, if you want this book, you have to wait at least a week for the traveling merchants to get it. What do I need you for in a week? Bai Xiaowen snorted. Jida was so scared that he almost knelt on the ground. My lord, please calm down. How about I go directly to the mayor's house and steal it? It is said that there are several bookcases in his study. This book should be there. Bullshit! Bai Xiaowen scolded. I am now living in the house of the mayor's son-in-law, Sheriff Ahan. You want to steal a book from the mayor's house? If Ahan finds out, he will accuse me of theft. Jida really knelt on the ground now. My lord, I really did not think of this. By the way, since you are living in Ahan's house, you can borrow a book from Ahan's wife, Jenny. It is said that Jenny likes to read. When she married Ahan, she brought a lot of books from her family. You know Jenny too? Bai Xiaowen was a little curious. Jida's face flushed a little. Jenny was the dream lover of all the young people in Hodgetown. It is just that low-level commoners like us don't have the courage to pursue her, Bai Xiaowen shrugged. Okay. I don't need you for the book. Go and do one more thing for me. Jida looked like a lackey. Please tell me, my lord. When they returned to Ahan's house, they saw Jenny. Ahan was not home yet, so Bai Xiaowen directly asked if he could borrow a few books to read to pass the time. Jenny was very happy and generous. She led the two of them to the bookshelves and let them choose. She went to the kitchen and started preparing dinner. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and looked around. He found the Tyrell anthology in the corner and immediately took it out. Jenny really likes to read. Look at the yellowed and wrinkled pages of this book. Who knows how many times it has been turned? Li Shui said. Yes, let's compare them first. For safety reasons, we'll talk in the team channel, Bai Xiaowen said in the team channel. Li Shui, team channel okay. The first sentence, our family is in town. Please take us with you. Bai Xiaowen recalled the contents of the excerpt that Hiram had held in his hand and calmly repeated the sentence. There was the sound of pages being flipped. It was very difficult for two people who had never read a book to find such an ordinary sentence. At the very least, it would be a waste of time. However, Bai Xiaowen was the least afraid of reading. After skimming through it once, he could memorize the whole book. This was what the ancients called reading 10 lines at a glance and reciting after reading once. It's page 21, line 18. After Bai Xiaowen flipped to the corresponding sentence, Li Shui followed Bai Xiaowen's instructions and recorded the page number and line number. The second sentence, that bastard Iron Man dared to lie to me. Bai Xiaowen said, squinting his eyes. It's page 40, line 5. The third sentence, Bai Xiaowen recited all the sentences written on the page. Then, he compared them to the Tyrell anthology and recorded the page number and line number one by one. In the end, the two of them got a long string of numbers. These numbers. What do they mean? Li Shui rested his chin on his hand and looked at Bai Xiaowen for help. This is a relatively common numerical code. Did you notice that, apart from the number of pages, the number of lines in the book does not exceed 26? Bai Xiaowen tapped his fingers on the table gently and said with a smile, each line corresponds to a Latin letter. Combine these letters and you can get the code. The order of the alphabet? The number 18 corresponds to R. 5 corresponds to E. Li Shui was a little enlightened. She wrote down the letters one by one on all the rows of numbers. A string of code words finally appeared on the surface. Misty month, 12th at Owl Wharf. Li Shui read this sentence softly and said, "We have the time and place. It seems that this is the code for the meeting." Bai Xiaowen nodded. "Yes, I looked at the date. Misty month is the second month of the year in the Black Tide continent, which is this month. The 12th is today. In other words, the two sides will meet at Owl Wharf tonight. In the midst of the evil slave trade, we are about to appear as the envoys of justice," Li Shui said with a smile. "We still have to find a way to let Han witness this scene with his own eyes." Bai Xiaowen thought more. The goal of the mission is to help Sheriff Han solve the missing persons case. In other words, if Han does not agree with our conclusion, I'm afraid that we will not complete the mission. Han came back at dinner time. He was somewhat dejected and was not in high spirits. "What's wrong? Is there no progress?" Bai Xiaowen asked. Han nodded solemnly. 2 more residents went missing last night in the Western District. Bai Xiaowen was indignant. The mastermind behind the scenes is too rampant. "I just patrolled the Western District 2 days ago." Han gritted his teeth. "If I run into them, I will make those damned guys pay the price." "I believe you will definitely catch them, Mr. Han," Bai Xiaowen said. "That's right, I will definitely catch those rats and hang them up so that all the residents of Hodge Town can see their faces." Han clenched his fists so tightly that the sound of his bones cracking could be heard. After dinner, Jenny washed up. Han picked up his helmet from the table and walked out. "I'm going to patrol the Southern District today. Try not to go out at night." Bai Xiaowen stood up. "Let's go together." Li Shui added, "Yes, Mr. Han, we will definitely be able to help." Han remembered that the two of them had killed the poison sect alchemist and acknowledged their strength. He nodded and said, "Okay. But patrolling the night isn't an easy job." When they walked out of the gate and headed for the militia's assembly point, Bai Xiaowen suddenly walked in front of Han and stopped him. "HM?" Han looked at him doubtfully. "Mr. Han, if you don't want to be played like a fool, please change tonight's patrol plan," Bai Xiaowen said. "Why?" "After today's investigation, I have good reason to suspect that there are spies among the patrols," Bai Xiaowen said indifferently. "Don't you think it's strange? Why do missing people always happen in towns that aren't patrolled?" Han's thick eyebrows furrowed. "That's impossible. My subordinates are all good lads. They would never do such a heartless thing. Trusting your subordinates is a good thing, but blind trust is not desirable," Bai Xiaowen said. "If Mr. Han is willing to believe me, then change the night patrol plan and take the militia to patrol the Eastern District. Moreover, this process must be kept absolutely secret from outsiders. After the militia receives the news of the change in plan, they must not leave your sight and contact the outside world." "It's hard for me to believe you," Han said seriously. "I understand. To you, I'm just a neighbor you've met a few times and only recently moved into your house. The militia patrols are your comrades who have fought side by side with you for many years. But you can also think about it. Will my proposal cause any loss to you or Hodge Town?" Bai Xiaowen said indifferently, "There is an abandoned pier in the Eastern District called the Owl Pier. As long as you go there, the mystery that has plagued you for several months will be completely solved." Han stared at Bai Xiaowen's eyes. "You? What are you hiding from me? In fact, the things I've investigated are too outrageous. You won't believe me if I tell you directly." "Only seeing is believing," Bai Xiaowen said. Okay. I agree to your request. If you can't give me a satisfactory answer tonight, my trust in you will disappear, Han said solemnly. Believe me, I won't betray your trust, Bai Xiaowen replied calmly. The Owl Pier had become an abandoned junkyard. Han led a group of militia patrols and silently laid an ambush between the trees outside the Owl Pier. All the militia had been temporarily changed in the course of their routine patrol and were pulled over. Bai Xiaowen also asked the militia to form groups of 2 and monitor each other. No one was allowed to make any abnormal movements. Even when going to the toilet, they couldn't leave Bai Xiaowen's sight. Bai Xiaowen also narrowed the range of his mental strength and monitored all the militia. It couldn't be helped. Although there were no such things as cell phones in the Black Tide plane, there were magic tools such as warning stones that could be used to transmit messages. Although Mayor Hiram might not be so vigilant as to give the traitor a magic tool to transmit messages in advance, there was no harm in being careful. If the deal was cancelled due to a moment of carelessness, Bai Xiaowen would have to face Han's doubts. At that time, it would be difficult to explain himself. Han acquiesced to Bai Xiaowen's grouping and monitoring. He was like a brewing volcano that could erupt at any time. The moon was in the middle of the sky, and the Owl Pier was quiet. Chapter 440. When the sack was opened, there were unconscious people inside. There were 10 of them in total. Evidently, these 10 people were the victims of the recent missing persons cases. Bai Xiaowen clearly felt a change in Han, who was beside him. It was a mixture of anger and curiosity. There was even a slight cracking sound coming from Han's thick knuckles. Don't be anxious, Mr. Han. This should be a human trafficking transaction. We only see the seller now. If possible, let's wait for the buyer to appear. Han's lips moved, but in the end, he remained silent. Bai Xiaowen stood up and walked to the side under the cover of the trees. He raised his hand and summoned Kits. It's time. Inform Jide of the Crow organization that it's time to work. Kits nodded and left stealthily. Bai Xiaowen returned to his ambush position. The moon was setting in the west and gradually disappeared into the clouds. The already weak moonlight became even dimmer. Suddenly, the sound of waves could be heard, and the fog on the distant sea surged. A ship sailed out of the fog and slowly approached the shore. With the appearance of the ship, the group of militiamen lying in ambush, including Han, began to breathe more rapidly. Heavens, it's the snake people, some militiamen covered their mouths and let out suppressed cries. A group of snake people warriors swam down from the ship and skillfully swam through the shallow water to the shore. On the other side, the bamboo curtain of the first carriage was lifted, and a thin and small old man with a slightly hunched back jumped down from it. Bai Xiaowen recognized this person to be the mayor of Hodge Town, Hiram David. Even Bai Xiaowen could recognize him, not to mention the militiamen of Hodge Town and Han, his son-in-law. Han's body suddenly trembled. How is this possible? How could it be him? Seeing Han's face full of disbelief, Bai Xiaowen thought, fortunately, I helped you catch him in the act. Otherwise, it would be strange if you believed my empty words. Mr. Han, let's act quickly. If we delay any longer, the snake people will take away the innocent residents. Bai Xiaowen reminded him at the right time. The eyes of all the militiamen were focused on Han. Han slowly straightened his back. Everyone, prepare for battle. Team 1, Team 2, surround them from the left and right. We must not let these long-tailed monsters return to the sea. As for Han himself, he strode forward with his two-handed heavy sword. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi followed closely behind. Noises rang out as 2 groups of militia rushed out and blocked the path of the Naga tribe returning to the ship. Hiss! The leading Naga warrior, holding a harpoon in his hand, said in a shrill voice, Hiram, what's going on? What do you want? Mayor Hiram's face had already turned pale and his body was trembling as soon as the militia patrol team appeared. Hearing the Naga warrior's question, he said loudly, "No, this has nothing to do with me. These people. I don't know where they came from. You have failed your people, Mayor." When Ahan stood in front of Mayor Hiram with his two-handed heavy sword, the mayor couldn't even speak. "Alexei, forgive me." Mayor Hiram pulled at his gray hair with a pained expression. "I have no right to forgive you. Only the citizens of Hodgetown have the right to judge you," Ahan said through clenched teeth. The leading Naga warrior suddenly laughed. An ugly smile appeared on his fleshy whiskers and scaly face. "So that's how it is. Hiram, this guy is the stumbling block you were talking about? As long as we kill him, the speed of our transaction will be greatly increased, right?" The other Naga warriors drew their weapons one after another. The two groups of militiamen also assumed battle stances. "Everyone, join the battle. Anyone who resists will be executed on the spot," Ahan roared. He swung his two-handed heavy sword and charged toward the leading Naga warrior. With this roar, all the militiamen, including Bai Xiaowen and Li Shui, were covered in a layer of blood-red light. A notification from the spiritual realm's precepts came. "Giant war hero Ahan's skill, Battle Roar, has been activated. Your attack power increases by 10 points for 30 seconds. Compared to the Wrathclaw's Howl, a group buff skill that increased attack power by a fixed 10 points each had their own advantages. Ahan's Battle Roar was more suitable for leading a large group of weak soldiers into battle. No matter how high the base attack power was, it would increase the damage of the soldiers by 10 points, greatly increasing the damage of the soldiers. On the other hand, the Wrathclaw's Howl was more suitable for elite troops. The higher the base attack power and attack speed, the greater the increase. The individual strength of the militia patrols was inferior to that of the Naga warriors. However, with the buff of the Battle Roar skill, they could somewhat suppress the Nagas. Bai Xiaowen had already scanned them with insight. These Naga warriors had a unified title, Naga Marauders. The leading Naga warrior was level 7, and his name was Claremont. There was also a parenthesis behind his name, Naga Marauders Leader. Bai Xiaowen really wanted to kill this Naga Marauders leader Claremont. He should be able to obtain a treasure chest. However, it was obviously impossible for the enraged Ahan to stop. Bai Xiaowen could only settle for the next best thing, which was to get some soul essence. The specific method was to shoot Claremont first, and then fire a bullet at each of the Naga warriors. This way, each Naga warrior would receive Bai Xiaowen's kill contribution, and the Black Spirit Stone could absorb their souls after they died. Bai Xiaowen originally thought that even if the Naga Marauders leader Claremont couldn't defeat Ahan, he would at least be able to last a few rounds. However, reality proved that he was wrong. As soon as they met, Ahan swung his two-handed épée and furiously chopped down. A magnificent giant sword shadow suddenly shot down from the sky. The harpoon in Claremont's hand was forcibly sent flying, and a huge, horrifying wound appeared on his body. A small half of his body, along with an arm, hung limply, and blood spurted out like it was worthless. Spirit World Law prompt message: Giant War Hero Ahan's skill, Sword of Sanctions, has been activated. Forcibly compressing 50% of one's maximum HP, boss rank targets are guaranteed to be critical hits. At the same time, 50% of the target's maximum HP will be added as holy damage, spell. There is also a possibility of crippling the target. Using Sword of Sanctions will cause all of Ahan's unyielding stacks to be reset to 0. Bai Xiaowen was inwardly speechless. Ahan was really angry, using a big move right away. He hadn't detected this skill before. It was simply crazy cool. Chapter 441. After killing Clement, the leader of the Naga Raiders, Ahan was like a tiger in a flock of sheep. Almost every time he swung his heavy sword, he would take the life of an elite Naga warrior. He could be called a battlefield harvester. The corners of Bai Xiaowen's eyes twitched. Judging from Ahan's display of strength, he was practically comparable to a rare boss. Just as Bai Xiaowen had deduced, the main mission's difficulty had been reduced by 50%, making it very easy for the awakened. As long as they found the mastermind behind the scenes, they didn't even need to take the initiative to participate in the battle. A powerful NPC like Ahan could handle it alone. What Bai Xiaowen felt was a bit of a pity was that the Naga leader, Clement, and the other Naga warriors hadn't dropped any treasure chests. They had only given Bai Xiaowen some soul points as a token. As the saying went, no sweat, no gain. Without the corresponding battle contribution points, the Awakened wouldn't be able to benefit from the monster's drops. The only thing Bai Xiaowen felt gratified was that since he had killed every monster with his spear, the Black Soul Stone could absorb the souls of the dead Nagas. This increased the growth rate of the Black Soul Stone by another level. Including the several days of continuous hunting in the treasure space of the Dead Soul Lake, Bai Xiaowen's Black Soul Stone had now accumulated 510 soul essences. The Naga raiders had all been wiped out. Ahan, carrying his heavy sword, walked up to the mayor, Hiram. Hiram's face was pale. After a moment of silence, Ahan gave the order to the militia. Tie him up. Alyosha. The sound of horse hooves could be heard in the distance. A woman galloped over on horseback. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes and sighed softly. What will come, will come. The woman was none other than Alexei's wife and Hiram's daughter, Ginny David. Ginny dismounted and walked up to Ahan. Alyosha, I beg of you. Can you let my father go? Jenny called out Ahan's nickname, her beautiful face completely drained of blood. You have to believe that it wasn't father's intention to do such a thing. You know what kind of person he is. He's kind by nature. Under his thick eyebrows, Ahan stared at Jenny. You already knew about this, didn't you? Jean and I felt a little uneasy under Ahan's gaze and slowly lowered her head. Ahan smiled gloomily. It turns out that I've been kept in the dark all this time. Mayor Hiram, can you tell me now why you kidnapped your own residents and gave them to these long-tailed monsters? Mayor Hiram stammered, I don't know why. One day, I was fishing by the sea, and the waves washed up with a small wooden carving. I was deeply fascinated by it at first glance. Later, there was a strange voice in my heart that kept whispering in my ear, tempting me to do something irrational. Later, the Naga appeared and used some of the mistakes I had made to threaten me. I really didn't mean it. Ahan shook his head and said, that can't be your reason. Mayor Hiram heaved a sigh. Alexei, it's my fault for being weak. It has nothing to do with Jenny. After she found out, she tried to dissuade me many times. But at that time, I only wanted to protect my wealth and status, so I could only go down this path to the end. Then you can only accept the people's judgment. Ahan was expressionless. Ginny stood in front of Ahan and said tearfully, Alyosha, I've never begged you since I married you. This is the first time I'm begging you. Give my father another chance, okay? Mayor Hiram also said, Alexei, as long as you can protect my reputation, after today's events, I'm willing to step down from my position as mayor and choose you as the next mayor. You and Jenny's child will be the heir to my title. I've always treated you as my son, and Jenny is my favorite daughter. Ahan remained silent, but Bai Xiaowen could clearly see his big hands trembling slightly. Protect your reputation? I don't have that ability. Seeing Ahan's silence, Mayor Hiram added fuel to the fire. Ahan, the situation hasn't reached the point of no return yet. The serpent men who came to our rescue are already dead, and these kidnapped residents have been secretly imprisoned and have never seen my face. As long as we pin the crime on these serpent men, it'll be fine. Your militia patrols are extremely obedient to you. As long as you give the order to keep their mouths shut, they will never reveal the truth. Suddenly, Bai Xiaowen received a notification from the laws of the spiritual world. Progress of the main mission, the truth in the fog has changed. The criminal of the missing persons case, Hiram David, is trying to reach an agreement with the sheriff, Alexei Ahan, to deceive the public. If the truth of the missing persons case cannot be made public, the main mission will be declared a failure. Please prevent the two parties from reaching an agreement. Li Shi's expression changed slightly. Apparently, she had also received the same notification. She looked at Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen waved her hand slightly, indicating for Li Shi to calm down. In fact, Bai Xiaowen had already prepared for this situation. Mayor Hiram, I'm afraid it's impossible for you to deceive the people, Bai Xiaowen stood up and said. Hiram glared at Bai Xiaowen. Who are you? What right do you have to speak like that? Han said in a deep voice, Kale and Blum are my right-hand men. Without their participation, I still don't know the truth of the case. They are qualified to speak on this matter. Hiram's eyes were full of astonishment, resentment, and fear. He looked up and down at Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi, and his tone suddenly softened. You two are Han's friends, so you should know that if this matter is exposed, it will cause a heavy blow to Han's family and his reputation. The residents may no longer trust Han, and his position as sheriff will be deprived. For Han's sake, please conceal the truth of this matter. As the mayor of Hodge Town, Hiram's IQ wasn't low. At this time, he couldn't threaten Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi verbally. That would only backfire. Using Han as an example would make Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi much more likely to shut their mouths. However, Bai Xiaowen wouldn't back down. He shook his head and said, Unfortunately, there's no turning back now. What do you mean? Hiram's expression changed. Someone's coming. A lot of people. A militia ran over in the distance and said, panting. Noisy footsteps and voices could be heard. From the intersection in the west, a long line of torches could be seen. Hundreds of residents of Hodge Town were rushing over. Where's the murderer? Punish the kidnapper severely. My son. I beg the Lord of Light to keep him safe. Hiram's face turned pale again. This time, there was no color at all. Han looked at Bai Xiaowen. Bai Xiaowen said calmly, I've notified the families of the missing people. Of course, during the process of notifying them, some residents with excessive curiosity also came over. The number of people is a bit more than I expected. I believe that the residents have the right to know the truth, at least the families of the victims have this right. After a pause, Bai Xiaowen continued. If Mr. Mayor can make all these angry families of the victims keep their mouths shut, then I can only admit that you have a strong influence and outstanding acting skills. I won't interfere in this matter anymore. Mayor Hiram's face was pale. It was easy to make a small group of people keep their mouths shut, but how could it be so easy to make hundreds of people, especially the families of the victims, keep their mouths shut? Mayor Hiram suddenly thought of something. He suddenly stepped forward and grabbed Han's arm. There's no time. This is your last chance. Announce to these residents that these Nagas kidnapped the residents. I'm here to help you solve the case. Bai Xiaowen shook his head slightly. There was no time. There were still two groups of patrolling militia present. In order to conceal the truth, besides relying on Han's prestige to give orders, Mayor Hiram also had to bribe the militia with gold coins, then unify their statements and fabricate a lie that everyone could accept. In addition, Bai Xiaowen wouldn't sit back and watch Mayor Hiram muddle through. It was necessary to stand up and expose him. Their identities were originally residents of Hodge Town, not outsiders, so the credibility of their words was still very high. This was also the benefit of their identities. Han's big hand, which was like an iron clamp, gripped Mayor Hiram's wrist and slowly but firmly moved his hand away. He said word by word, I won't do that. The people have the right to know the truth. You can tell the whole story of how you were bewitched and ask for the people's forgiveness. Then, you can give up your aristocratic status to offset your death sentence. This was the benefit of the evil feudal system. Aristocratic crimes and civilian crimes were completely different. Minor crimes could be redeemed with money, and even major crimes like serial kidnapping could be atoned for by stripping one of their aristocratic status. But for an aristocrat, this was no different from killing him. Mayor Hiram slumped to the ground and murmured, No, you can't do this. The David family can't fall in my hands, Jenny. Jenny's face was full of tears as she hugged Mayor Hiram. Father, this is your best choice. In order to no longer have to suffer the torment of your conscience, it's acceptable to give up your aristocratic status. Next, the victims' families arrived at the docks. Ahan dispatched his militia to tell the residents the whole story of the missing persons case. Some were angry, and some were shocked, but most people expressed relief that their kidnapped family members weren't in mortal danger, which was a good thing. Ahan didn't take credit for himself, and gave all the credit for solving the case to Bai Xiaowen and his sister. Bai Xiaowen watched the scene in silence, and suddenly said to Li Shui, "Let's go. I'm not used to being watched and thanked by so many people in the spiritual realm." When the residents followed Ahan's instructions and prepared to thank the siblings for their bravery, they couldn't find them. Ahan couldn't find them either, and the expression on his face was very complicated. He now really regarded Bai Xiaowen and his sister as upright people who didn't seek fame or fortune and only sought justice, and he was ashamed of his previous hesitation. Main mission, The Truth in the Fog, has been completed. Do you want to submit it? Submit. You have completed the main mission in 3 days. You have obtained a special item, Abyss Party Invitation. In the next 7 days, 15 hours, 23 minutes, and 5 seconds, you can freely explore and leave the spiritual realm at any time. The psionic energy points, equipment, and items you have obtained in the Black Tide plane will not disappear. Abyss Party Invitation. The first thing that came to Bai Xiaowen's mind was the poison milk gained from the Christian era, and the voice of a certain blonde girl. Participant of the trial, I hope you can drive away evil with a tenacious will like this cross. In another time and space, Bai Xiaowen's poison milk gain was getting thinner and thinner, and the reason why he left in the end was that he no longer had the money to protect Allard. Well, that was probably it. The past was unbearable to look back on. After letting his thoughts wander for 0.1 seconds, Bai Xiaowen checked the description of the Abyss Party Invitation. Abyss Party Invitation, an invitation letter containing mysterious power. It can only be used in the Black Tide plane. Using this item will trigger a new main mission. The new main mission will give you a period of time to stay, and the period of time given by your first main mission will not conflict with each other. Warning, the mysterious power on this invitation letter is rapidly dissipating. Please choose whether to use it as soon as possible. Warning, the difficulty of the triggered mission may not match your awakened level. On a slightly old parchment, there was a line of words written in ancient Latin, "Those who stare at the abyss is also staring at you." At the end of the parchment, a line of sparks ignited, and then spread at a speed visible to the naked eye. Judging from the speed of the sparks spreading, the invitation letter would be completely burned within a minute. This was probably the first warning. The mysterious power of the invitation letter is rapidly dissipating. The two looked at each other. Li Shui reacted quickly and said decisively, "You make the decision. Don't feel burdened." Bai Xiaowen smiled and nodded. "I choose to use it." Bai Xiaowen had already checked with the rules of the spiritual realm. The second main mission and the period of time given by the first main mission were independent of each other and did not conflict with each other. That was to say, after Bai Xiaowen accepted the second main mission, the period of time given by the second main mission would not affect the remaining 7 days of free exploration time of the first main mission. If Bai Xiaowen accepted the second main mission and was given 10 days to complete it, and completed it 8 days in advance, then the additional 2 days of free exploration time would be combined with the free exploration time of the first main mission, and he would finally have more than 9 days of free exploration time. Chapter 442. Using the invitation to the Abyss Party would trigger the second main quest. The only bad thing was that, if Bai Xiaowen was in danger of losing his life during the second main quest, he would have to use the return item and leave the Black Tide realm. In this way, the remaining 7 days of free exploration of the first main quest would be wasted. However, Bai Xiaowen was still quite confident. Although he was only level 5 now, with the support of his dark gold equipment and exclusive equipment, his strength was no worse than a level 7 awakened hero. Even if the second main quest was difficult and did not match his level, he would not be forced to leave the Black Tide realm in advance. With Bai Xiaowen's choice, the sparks on the invitation stopped, and only a corner of it burned. Soon, the words on the invitation changed: when light and darkness intersect, when the sun of the sea touches the earth, board the ferry that shuttles between the realms of yin and yang. The messenger of God will take you to the other side. Li Shi looked at the words on the invitation and shook his head with a bitter smile. Why is it a riddle again? I find that there are always some mysterious things in the Black Tide realm. How do I explain this? Bai Xiaowen thought for a while and said, these 4 sentences are not difficult to understand. The first 2 sentences refer to the timing. The so-called intersect of light and darkness generally has 2 periods, one is dusk, and the other is dawn. The sun of the sea touches the earth actually refers to the rising tide of the sea. Referring to the ferry that shuttles between the realms of yin and yang, I think it should be during the rising tide at dawn. We have to board a special boat at a specific location to participate in the Abyss Party. Li Shi had a feeling of realization and then said, where is the specific location? Bai Xiaowen picked up the invitation and looked at it carefully. On the back of the invitation, he found a floating black arrow. A strange thing happened. No matter how Bai Xiaowen turned and folded the invitation, the black arrow always pointed in one direction, the direction of the owl pier. This black arrow should be a hint of the location. I didn't expect it to be the owl pier. Bai Xiaowen said with a smile. That's good. Why don't we wait near the pier? It's after midnight now, and dawn is coming. A notification from the precepts of the spirit realm sounded, you've already deciphered the guidance information on the invitation to the Abyss Party. You have received a further hint. Please go to the owl pier before dawn and board the Nagelful. Li Shi looked at the night owl pier in the distance. The victims' families had already woken up the kidnapped residents and were returning one after another. Mayor Hiram's hands were finally tied up and he was escorted to the carriage by 2 patrolling militiamen. Ahan looked around as if he were looking for something. After a long time, he seemed to sigh and helped his sobbing wife Jenny onto the horse. Holding the reins, he slowly followed the crowd. So we don't have to go back to Hodgetown? I feel like I should say goodbye to Ahan and his wife. Bai Xiaowen shook his head. Forget it. No matter how you look at it, it's best not to meet him. Li Shi nodded slightly. Ahan is actually a good person. I hope he won't be implicated by Hiram. Only if he continues to be the sheriff will Hodgetown truly enjoy peaceful days. Bai Xiaowen was silent. He could actually guess that Ahan might not be able to continue to be the sheriff. With Hiram's fall, Hodgetown would face a power reshuffle. As the son-in-law of the former mayor and the commander of an important armed force, the patrolling militia, how could Ahan stay out of this? He was bound to be involved in the power struggle. With Ahan's current guilt, it was almost impossible for him to actively advance in this power struggle. The power struggle was like rowing a boat against the current. If you didn't advance, you would fall behind. After someone else took over as mayor of Hodgetown, Ahan, the sheriff, would sooner or later step down from his position in the public opinion. However, Bai Xiaowen wasn't worried about the safety of Ahan and his wife Jenny. As a level 8 leader and the strongest person in Hodgetown, even if Ahan lost his position as sheriff, few people would be willing to provoke him. After all the residents and patrolling soldiers of Hodgetown left, Kits returned, followed by Jide and some elite members of the Crow organization. Jide and the others smiled apologetically. Bai Xiaowen had previously instructed them to secretly notify the missing people's families and gather them together. After Kits went to notify them, the Crow organization immediately notified the missing people's families and asked them to go to Owl Pier. Only then did they block Hiram's deal with the Nagas, leaving Hiram with no way out. Bai Xiaowen nodded. You did well. I'll leave Hodgetown soon. According to our agreement, you're free. Jide and the others all heaved a sigh of relief. Joshua's bizarre death had shocked them greatly. Bai Xiaowen's miraculous methods had frightened them. Now that this mysterious figure was finally leaving Hodgetown, they all felt as if the sharp sword hanging over their heads had been removed. Bai Xiaowen smiled faintly. Jide, don't be too happy just yet. What I mean is, I will no longer be involved in the matters of the Crow organization. No matter who kills who, or who becomes the boss, it has nothing to do with me. Jide's expression changed slightly. He suddenly remembered that his position as the boss had been supported by Bai Xiaowen. For this, he had even chopped off the head of the previous boss, Benny. Although it was just whipping the corpse, the lower-level members would definitely despise him. Now that Bai Xiaowen was no longer in charge of the Crow organization, it meant that Jide would no longer be under Bai Xiaowen's protection. His backer was gone. Jide turned to look at the other elites of the Crow organization. Under the moonlight, their faces were hidden, and he couldn't see any special expressions. However, the more they were like this, the more Jide felt uneasy. Sir, the Crow organization is still willing to pledge our loyalty to you, please don't abandon us. Jide reacted quickly. Bai Xiaowen originally didn't care about the Crow organization. He didn't need to waste his energy on such a weak underground organization. But now that he had nothing to do, Bai Xiaowen nodded and said with a smile, "It's better to have something than nothing." "Are you sure? Can you speak for the others?" Jide's head nodded vigorously. The other elite's expressions couldn't be seen, but no one dared to object. "All right, you guys can go back. I'll be back in the future. Maybe there will be times when I need you guys," Bai Xiaowen said. Jide and the others left with their own thoughts. Bai Xiaowen and Jide walked to the abandoned wooden boat at the Owl Pier and continued to wait. The moon was hanging in the west, and when the hazy rays of light gradually appeared in the east, the sea was high, and the sea was covered in fog. A horn sounded from the bottom of the sea, and in the fog, a tattered boat full of shells and oysters slowly sailed over. Chapter 443 equals Z 2 hashtag HK K Tet W 7 Re G. The phar was about 20 meters long, and there was a huge statue of a snake-haired banshee at the bow. Its flagpole was rotten, and its sails were as tattered as a tramp's underwear. It made people wonder if the ship would sink into the sea in the next second. In particular, the entire Nagelfar was shrouded in a layer of fog. Only the outline of the ship could be seen, but nothing could be seen on the ship. Ordinary people would not dare to board such a ship. However, Bai Xiaowen and Li Shui were also awakened ones who were used to storms and waves. Naturally, they would not be afraid. Taking advantage of the high tide, the Nagelfar docked, and a layer of footboards was laid out in the fog. The waves gently caressed the earth. Other than the sound of the wind and waves, there was no sound of people. This scene was unavoidably a little creepy. Bai Xiaowen held Li Shui's hand and calmly stepped onto the footboard. The two passed through the layer of fog and arrived on the ship. "This ship is as old as I imagined," Li Shui whispered. Indeed, even the boards of the ship were dark and damp, as if it had been soaked in water for a long time. Bai Xiaowen frowned and looked at the sailors walking back and forth on the ship. The sailors came from different races, mainly humans and Nagas. According to the history of the Black Tide Plain that Bai Xiaowen had read, humans and Nagas were in a hostile relationship. He did not expect that on this ship, they would live in harmony and become crew members. Moreover, the appearance of these sailors was a little strange. Many of their skin was pale and slightly swollen, as if they had been in the water for a long time. There were also some shells, seaweed, and other things hanging on their shoulders and ears. Bai Xiaowen narrowed his eyes. He thought of a pirate movie that he had seen in another time and space. There was a ghost ship in the movie, and it looked exactly like this ship and its crew. Coincidentally, a sailor in human form passed by. Bai Xiaowen gently patted him on the shoulder. "Hey buddy, where's the ship heading?" The human sailor turned around. Bai Xiaowen and Li Shui were both shocked. This sailor's eyes were empty and unfocused. They didn't look like the eyes of a living person at all. When Bai Xiaowen patted him on the shoulder, he turned around instinctively. When he opened his mouth, seawater mixed with saliva flowed out from the corner of his mouth. After turning his head instinctively, the sailor turned his head back mechanically and continued to work. Undead? Li Shi's ponytail almost stood up. A ferry that shuttles between the worlds of the living and the dead. Bai Xiaowen looked at the words on the invitation to the Abyss Party and said thoughtfully, "It's not strange to have such a sailor. Let's see what clues are on this ship first." After Bai Xiaowen finished speaking, he walked toward the statue of the Gorgon at the bow of the ship. He had already noticed that in front of the statue, there was a row of rectangular boxes that looked like standing coffins. Moreover, there were two tall undead sailors standing in front of the boxes. They seemed to be guarding them. However, when Bai Xiaowen stepped on the gangway at the bow of the ship, he was stopped. A undead sailor blocked the two of them with an expressionless face. The rule of the spiritual realm prompted the message, "Warning, the Nagelful has set sail. Any guests who don't follow the rules of the game will be thrown into the sea and lose the qualification to participate in the Abyss Party." It seems that the rule of the spiritual realm doesn't allow us to pry into the secrets of this ship, Bai Xiaowen said. I used my insight talent to look at these undead sailors. Their attributes are very weak. They are only equivalent to monsters with ordinary high-level templates. I suspect that there must be a secret in the vertical coffins in front of the bow of the ship. Li Shi said, "Since the rule of the spiritual realm has issued a warning, let's bear with it for the time being. Let's wait until the main mission is triggered." After Bai Xiaowen used the invitation letter, the second main mission was not triggered immediately. Instead, it was given a code to take a ship to the Night Owl Pier. According to Bai Xiaowen's speculation, the second main mission should only be triggered when they arrived at the target area. In other words, they were still in the free exploration time brought by the first main mission. Before accepting the second main mission, the two of them were safe. The Nagelful was like a ghost, silently sailing on the Black Sea. After about an hour of sailing, the fog in front of them dispersed, and their field of vision suddenly became empty. Under the morning light, the sea was quiet and vast, and the sky and water merged into one. "Look!" Li Shi suddenly exclaimed. "What's that?" The sea in front of them suddenly became turbulent, forming a huge whirlpool with a diameter of thousands of meters. The Nagelful, on the other hand, sailed straight towards the great whirlpool. The rule of the spiritual realm prompted the message, "You have arrived at the target area, Shimmer Abyss. Main mission, the secret of the latent shadow labyrinth activated. Mission objective, open the central secret room of the latent shadow labyrinth and obtain the prophecy slate. Mission difficulty, data in disorder, unable to be calculated. Mission duration, data in disorder, unable to be calculated. Mission reward, data in disorder, unable to be calculated." Without waiting for Bai Xiaowen and Li Shi to come back to their senses, another notification suddenly appeared. Main mission, Transcendence Game activated. Mission objective, join the Guardian Sect/Blasphemer camp and win the Transcendence Game. Mission difficulty, S. Mission duration, 10 days. Mission reward, number of uses of the wishing pool *1. Why are there two main missions at the same time? Li Shi said in surprise. And, both main missions are very strange. Which one should I choose? These two main missions shouldn't conflict. There's no option to choose one of the two. Bai Xiaowen frowned and said, "In comparison, I think the second main mission is a little weirder. What's the wishing fountain usage?" No matter how I look at it, it's, suddenly, the Gorgon statue at the bow of the ship emitted a demonic purple light. For a moment, Bai Xiaowen felt as if his soul had left his body. It was as if there was a strong attraction force that pulled his consciousness out of his body. The spiritual realm's rules prompted the message, "You are affected by the abyssal gaze." The will test failed. Soul consciousness is being stripped. At the same time, Bai Xiaowen felt a sharp pain in his left eye. The red light in his eye suddenly became scorching hot, like a demonic eye that was burning with flames. Unknown interference, data in disorder, unknown interference, 100,000 psionic energy points will be deducted. You can be free from the influence of the abyssal gaze and leave the black-tide bit wall. Yes/no? Bai Xiaowen gritted his teeth, looked at Li Shui, and used his insight. Li Shui stood at the bow of the ship like a wooden stake. Her face was still beautiful, but her eyes had lost their light. She was like a white jade statue. Behind Li Shui's name, there was a status, soul separation. Soul separation, the target is in a state of suspended animation. This state will last for 7 natural days. After the state of suspended animation ends, if the soul consciousness does not return to the body, the target will die directly. F***ck, Bai Xiaowen's facial muscles twitched. He forced himself to calm down and looked at the 2 main mission options again. He thought about the situation and the strangeness of the 2 main missions. After 0.1 seconds, Bai Xiaowen's consciousness focused on the previous spiritual realm's rules prompt, 100,000 psionic energy points deducted, leave the black-tide bit wall. He directly chose no. He took a deep breath, raised his slightly trembling left hand, and covered his left eye. His right eye stared at the snake-haired banshee statue that was emitting a strange red light. The terrible feeling of his soul being separated emerged again. Bai Xiaowen spat out the last 2 words. His low voice sounded like a whisper. Come on, Bai Xiaowen's soul was instantly separated. At the last moment, he saw 2 undead sailors open the vertical coffin lid and stuffed him and Li Shui's body into the coffin. His vision quickly zoomed out. The Nagerful suddenly plunged into the depths of the great whirlpool. When Bai Xiaowen woke up again, the first thing he found was that he was in a magnificent hall. He looked up and saw a magnificent dome. A chain hung down, and candlelight swayed gently above his head. In the center of the hall was a huge round table. Including Bai Xiaowen, a total of 12 people wearing black cloaks were sitting around the round table. Directly behind each person, there was an upright coffin. The coffin was engraved with animal reliefs. There were chickens, dogs, monkeys, pigs, and so on. In the center of the huge round table was a clear pool. There were pieces of colorful stones in the pool. The faint light reflected through the pool formed a faint rainbow. Bai Xiaowen immediately checked his status. He tried to open the attribute panel, but he got a prompt. Your soul is separated. Unable to open the attribute panel. Bai Xiaowen was not discouraged. He looked at the latest notifications of the spiritual realm's rules. You are affected by the abyssal gaze. Your soul and body are separated. In the state of separation, you are unable to attack, use skills, or items. Please return to your body within 7 natural days. Failure to do so will result in immediate death. You have entered the shimmering abyss, hidden shadow labyrinth. You have automatically accepted the main mission, Game of Extraordinaries. Bai Xiaowen quickly checked the mission information. He realized that out of the 2 main missions that he had triggered, only one was automatically accepted. The other mission, The Secret of the Hidden Shadow Labyrinth, was not accepted. The yes/no selection box was flashing, indicating that it would disappear in a few minutes. Bai Xiaowen's consciousness chose to accept the main mission, The Secret of the Hidden Shadow Labyrinth. After doing this, Bai Xiaowen looked up and scanned the other 11 people sitting around the round table in the hall. They were all cloaked in black like him. When he saw the cloaked person opposite him, Bai Xiaowen's heart suddenly throbbed. He could clearly sense that it was Li Shui. Or rather, it was Li Shui's soul. Behind Li Shui, the coffin relief was a picture of a rat and a Roman numeral 1. Bai Xiaowen looked back. The coffin relief behind him was a picture of a sheep and a Roman numeral 8. Suddenly, a white light rose from the center of the round table. Accompanied by this light, a loud voice echoed in the hall. The awakening should be successful. Welcome to the Abyss Party to participate in the Game of Extraordinaries. The winner of the game will get a chance to use the wishing fountain. Most of you have gone through many rounds of elimination before sitting here for the final battle. You should be very clear about the rules of the Game of Extraordinaries. Of course, for the sake of fairness, I will transmit the specific rules of the Game of Extraordinaries to your consciousness. A stream of information flowed into Bai Xiaowen's mind. Bai Xiaowen's face, which was covered by the cloak, quickly became interesting. This game of extraordinaries was called Resurrection of the Colossal Dragon. First, the background of this game. A long, long time ago, the world was peaceful under the protection of the Colossal Dragon. People worshipped the Colossal Dragon and established a guardian sect. Later, the Colossal Dragon fell and the demons invaded. The demons, who could transform into human forms and were good at sowing discord, quickly plunged the continent into the flames of war. The believers and priests of the Guardian sect came to the latent shadow labyrinth with the relics of the Colossal Dragon and prepared to perform the sacred ritual to resurrect the Colossal Dragon. If the Colossal Dragon was resurrected, the demons would face a disaster. However, the secret operation of the Guardian sect was discovered by the demons and they mixed into this team. If the resurrection ritual was interfered with by the demons, not only would the ritual fail, but the demons would also desecrate the remains of the Colossal Dragon and absorb its power. There would be no hope for the continent. Therefore, the Guardian sect had to find all the blasphemers, in other words, the demons, and eliminate them before they could perform the sacred ritual. In game terms, the victory condition of the Guardian sect was to eliminate all the blasphemers. However, the ritual to resurrect the Colossal Dragon required the guidance of at least one priest and an ordinary believer to provide pure power of faith to complete it. If all the priests or ordinary believers died, the ritual to resurrect the Colossal Dragon would be declared impossible and the demons would desecrate the remains of the Colossal Dragon. In other words, the victory condition of the blasphemy faction was to eliminate all the priests or ordinary believers. The game was divided into night and day. Night was the home ground of the blasphemy faction. Every night, the blasphemers could gather together to discuss and kill a team member. Suicide was also allowed. Day was the home ground of the Guardian sect. Every day, everyone in the team would gather together and take turns to speak and discuss. They would vote for a suspicious member and eliminate them. It was important to note that the good people of the Guardian sect only knew their own identities and did not know each other. This also gave the demons space to take advantage of the situation and even sow discord and frame others. The person who was eliminated during the day might be a good person of the Guardian sect. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.